transmigrated and became the weakest demon lord, yet he conquered the other world with just his words, simply because his political ability and eloquence were both 3 seconds level, and he also possessed a special skill, Apostle of Aphrodite. This skill allowed him to see others' favorability toward him. Then he used psychological tactics to precisely manipulate human nature. A seemingly simple sentence made enemies slaughter each other. In the end, even the hero's party became his pawns. Before transmigrating, the man had always lived in his father's shadow because his father was an absolute demon until his father's accidental death. He discovered the 500 million in assets his father had hidden, so he quit his job and immersed himself in gaming every day. Dungeon Defense was an incredibly interesting game. The man spent a full 2.5 months to clear the game. However, just as he cleared it, a mysterious message suddenly caught his attention. When he opened it, it was a survey questionnaire. After he filled it out, he realized, could this be a phone scam? The man was speechless about this. Just as he put down the controller, a cockroach the size of a slipper appeared on the desk. When he reached out to swat the cockroach, he accidentally touched the confirm button on the controller, along with a flash of bright light. A sharp pain swept through his entire body, and there was a group of menacing men staring at him. Thus, he welcomed his new life. Later, he heard from the humans about the demon lord and treasure. This made him very confused, because he clearly remembered he was just playing games at home, then suddenly appeared here. At this moment, the man wanted to get up and run, but when he looked behind him, he found his legs couldn't move at all. The pain nearly made him lose his rationality, but he knew that in times like these, he needed to stay calm. Then he begged for mercy from the humans before him, hoping to obtain some clues from them. Just as he was asking the humans, a man grabbed him by the horns, thinking he had been beaten stupid. Otherwise, how could he forget his identity as Demon Lord Dantalion? Hearing this, his heart jolted, because this name was incredibly familiar. It was precisely the name of the Demon Lord from the dungeon strategy game he played. That was an extremely difficult game. The only ending was the collapse of the world. As for Dantalion, he was the trash among 72 Demon Lords, ranked 71st, and he was also the first Demon Lord defeated by adventurers. Recalling all the strange phenomena just now, this made him even more certain that he was currently in the game world, and he had become the weakest Demon Lord. Before Dantalion could snap out of it, he was flung away by an adventurer. Seeing this, the adventurers behind him said in unison, "Kill the Demon Lord." Then they punched and kicked him, and the man's consciousness gradually faded. He never expected that even at death's door, his father's face still wouldn't disappear. His father was the cause of the man's unfortunate childhood, because his father often incurred debts outside. The man was frequently kidnapped as a child. The kidnappers never expected the child before them would be so calm. Even with a gun pressed to his head, he didn't panic at all. Instead, the kidnappers became nervous. The child thought, if he really shoots, then I can get away from my damned father. And the frightened kidnappers chose to turn themselves in. From that moment on, he understood that whoever had firmer resolve would survive to the end. Even if the situation was extremely unfavorable to him, he could still shape the entire situation into what he wanted. And what he needed to do now was survive. Just as the adventurers were about to kill the Demon Lord, Dantalion quickly raised his hands in surrender, saying, "I can tell you where the treasure is." The problem now was he also didn't know where the Demon Lord's treasure was, but if he randomly told them a location now, they would kill him without hesitation, so he must now find a way to preserve himself. Thus he told everyone the location of the treasure, and it required his own magic to unlock. Then the blonde man stuck his sword in front of him and warned him, if he dared play any tricks, he would kill him without hesitation. Watching their reaction, Dantalion knew the adventurers believed what he said. For the treasure, they couldn't possibly make a move prematurely, and next he needed to think of the next step of his plan. In this world of beasts and prey, one never knew when they would become someone else's prey, so before the adventurers eliminated him, he must strike first. But in his current condition, it was impossible. A severely injured body against 10 robust adventurers was simply impossible. He continuously observed his surroundings, but found no usable items, and Dantalion didn't know how much longer until they reached the Demon Lord's palace. Damn it, was this really a game? Just then he snapped back to reality, so he decisively activated Eye of Zeus. Sure enough, just as he expected, a status window suddenly appeared before him. The Eye of Zeus was a high-level skill in the game. It allowed you to see your current location, enemy attributes and status, items and traps in the dungeon. It was also the only high-level skill in the early game. This was the first tutorial for adventurers to learn the game mechanics, although he didn't know why he became a Demon Lord. That was already beside the point, but the Demon Lord's attributes left him speechless, because all of Dantalion's stats were 0. Even the castle had no soldiers guarding it. At the same time, a new panel popped up, sign a contract with Hades. It turned out Dantalion had a skill to hire monsters, but it also required spending gold coins. The problem now was Dantalion only had 100 gold coins on him. There were 10 adventurers. If he hired 8 goblins, defeating them would be very difficult. But if he scattered the adventurers, then hired a small robot, the success rate was 60%. Watching them get closer and closer to the palace, he had no time to consider, so he could only gamble. But before that, he needed to gain the adventurers' trust. Dantalion activated Eye of Zeus again. All the adventurer's information was laid bare before him, and next was his showtime. As the only high-level skill in the early game, this skill allowed him to see other players' status details, but these were usually hidden. The reason Dantalion in the game was judged as bottom-ranked was because his combat power was very low, no different from an ordinary person. That's why he became the first target for adventurers to subjugate. Just then, Dantalion called out to everyone, saying, "There are many traps ahead. If you step into them, no one can come out unscathed." So Dantalion proposed to go ahead and disarm the traps himself. Then he walked forward alone. But these adventurers obviously didn't trust him much, because if he ran away, they'd have nothing. Hearing this, Dantalion said, "Don't worry, after all, one of my legs is injured. How could I possibly escape under the eyes of so many adventurers?" Then he continued saying, "After all, you didn't kill me directly like others, so I'm willing to give all the treasure to you," although the blonde man was reluctant. The other adventurers thought what the demon lord said made sense. After all, they didn't want to lose their lives for nothing, and only Dantalion knew there were no traps inside at all. This was just a ruse he made up. Then he took out the bow and arrow hidden behind him, because he needed to do something, to make the adventurers trust him. A moment later, a miserable scream came from inside the tunnel. Afraid the demon lord died, everyone hurried inside. Following the blood trail, they found the demon lord lying on the ground. This confused the adventurers. They asked, "Why are you helping us?" So Dantalion placed his hand on his chest, saying, "You're different from the previous adventurers. You didn't kill me immediately but let me live. This moved me deeply, so I felt I should do something for you." And the blonde man, seeing the demon lord's sincere expression, believed it was true. Just then, a dialogue box suddenly appeared, displaying, "The adventurer's favorability toward you has increased," and this was exactly what Dantalion expected. This couldn't help but make the corner of his mouth curl up slightly. The performance had just begun. To thank His Majesty the Demon Lord for saving them, the blonde man had his subordinates help him up. For this, Dantalion expressed his gratitude. Soon the Demon Lord integrated into the team, but their leader was a tough opponent, because once he obtained the treasure, he would kill the Demon Lord without hesitation. The scene shifted. They finally arrived at the Demon Lord's palace, so the blonde man immediately had the Demon Lord tell him the treasure's location. When everyone looked back, they didn't expect the Demon Lord's tears to fall. This stunned all the adventurers. And next was Dantalion's showtime. He said, "Because I remembered my family." It turned out that several years ago, his family was all killed by an army of unknown origin. Even his closest guard died protecting him. After half a day of emotional manipulation, his performance reached its climax, and this once again refreshed the humans' understanding of demon lords, because they always thought demon lords had no emotions. The lack of guards along the way proved everything he said was true. The adventurers before him were just as Dantalion expected. They all began to sympathize with him. Only their leader had no interest in this, because he only wanted the demon lord's wealth. So he once again expressed his gratitude to everyone, saying, "To thank you, I've decided to give all the treasure to you all." Then Dantalion slowly stepped forward and motioned for everyone to step back. To get the treasure, they quickly retreated to the doorway, and now his plan should come to an end. Actually, there was no so-called treasure in the Demon Lord's palace at all. All of Dantalion's possessions were just these 100 Demon Lord coins. But fooling these stupid adventurers was enough. The game was designed this way. When you discard items, money appears where you left. One Demon Lord coin could be exchanged for 15 silver coins. Then Dantalion pretended to chant magic. Under the adventurer's gaze, hundreds of silver coins fell from the air. Seeing this, the blonde showed a satisfied expression. At the same time, his favorability toward Dantalion also increased. At this moment, he was thinking about how to better use the Demon Lord. Killing him now would be a complete waste. Just as the adventurers were immersed in the joy of obtaining treasure, Dantalion told them bad news. At this moment, a team of 30 people had entered his castle, because, as the castle's master, he would receive notice whenever someone entered. Hearing this, the adventurers immediately fell into fear, because they couldn't possibly fight 30 people. Then they hurriedly asked Dantalion if there was another exit, and he could only helplessly tell everyone there was only the route they came from. After getting the answer, they were all disheartened. Then the Demon Lord said, "They don't need to worry, because I will help you." At the same time, Dantalion had the blonde open the map, so he explained his plan, which was to have him act as bait. He assumed they were an elite force who could sense the Demon Lord's location through magic, so they only needed to split into 2 groups to bypass these people. And this made the blonde suspicious. He said, "You're not deceiving us to escape, are you?" Hearing this, Dantalion once again pretended to say, "I sincerely want to help you all." Then he communicated privately with the blonde for a moment. After learning the Demon Lord's true plan, the blonde looked shocked, because the reason for splitting into 2 teams was to use some subordinates as bait. But he quickly regained his composure. After all, every man for himself. Then he had his brothers hurry up and divide the treasure equally. Faced with life and death matters, the captain naturally couldn't care about so much to survive, and Dantalion behind them darkened. The hunting time was about to begin. Soon the team split into 2 routes. The captain led one team, the other team followed Dantalion. Now he could finally eliminate the adventurers one by one. When they reached a relatively dark area, Dantalion decisively chose to strike. The next second, the ground shook violently. Then a small robot suddenly appeared before several people. Faced with this sudden thing, The adventurers had no time to react. The robot killed 2 adventurers with just one slap. Seeing this, another person drew his sword and swung at the robot. But unexpectedly, the robot was incredibly hard. As the robot swung its fist again, now only 1 adventurer remained, and the man was already terrified by this sudden change. When he retreated behind the demon lord, Dantalion delivered him a fatal blow. He asked in confusion, "Why did you kill me?" Hearing this, Dantalion revealed an evil smile, saying, "Because I'm a demon." On the other side, the captain and others also sensed the fighting sounds nearby, just as he wanted to thank the demon lord. Unexpectedly, Dantalion had already come before them through a secret door. Seeing this, the captain immediately sensed something wrong. He immediately asked where the rest went, and Dantalion didn't hide it, saying, "They've already been killed by my own hands." Hearing this, their favorability toward Dantalion instantly dropped to 0. Now Dantalion didn't need to care about these things anymore, saying, "You can only blame yourselves for being too stupid to even believe a demon's words." After saying this, they charged at Dantalion, and they didn't notice the robot hiding nearby at all. The next instant, a massive thing suddenly appeared. With just one charge, it eliminated 2 people before they could react. The robot immediately slapped the man behind. Seeing this, the man leaped up and smashed hard toward the robot's head, and the robot had half its head knocked off. Just as he felt proud, Dantalion had already appeared behind him, delivering him a fatal blow, and the robot's destroyed head healed again. This shocked the captain. If he wanted to destroy the robot, he had to smash its core, otherwise everything was futile. At this moment, the captain realized the demon lord was completely different from before. He realized everyone had been deceived by him. This was an absolute demon. Faced with this situation, he alone had no chance to fight back, so he decisively put down his weapon and surrendered. With a pitiful face, he begged Dantalion to spare him, but behind his back he hid a dagger, wanting to ambush him when the demon lord got close. Little did he know Dantalion had already seen through his thoughts. Dantalion stopped halfway. This stunned him. Then Dantalion laughed loudly, saying, "You fool, did you think I couldn't see through you?" And the captain naturally couldn't tolerate this. He immediately charged at Dantalion, but the next instant, he was suddenly tripped. When he looked back, it was unexpectedly a slime. Then the robot grabbed him. Now everything should end. Just as Dantalion killed the last adventurer, a dialogue box suddenly popped up. "Congratulations on completing the basic tutorial. Skills used in the tutorial cannot be used again. Please choose a skill to start your game." Looking at the information before him, he understood this was where the game truly began. That meant he still had to live on as Demon Lord Dantalion. He thought, then I must choose the right skill. He looked at a full page of high-level skills. After a moment of thought, he finally chose the S-level skill, Apostle of Aphrodite. Dantalion decisively chose Confirm. This was a skill that let you see others' status and their opinion of you. It looked like a simple mind-reading technique, because this skill best matched his attributes. After doing all this, his vision gradually blurred. Because this body hadn't closed its eyes for a week, now he just wanted to sleep well. When he regained consciousness, he found a woman appeared before him. This directly startled Dantalion, and the woman didn't waste words with him, directly stating her purpose for being here. 2 months ago, I lent you 100% Demon Lord gold coins, plus 96 coins in interest, a total of 196 Demon Lord coins. I hope you can fully repay me today. Hearing this, Dantalion immediately broke into a cold sweat. He didn't expect that just as one crisis was resolved, a new crisis immediately appeared. Lapis, a girl with eyes as cold as ice. So Dantalion wanted to brush it off, but she seemed to have already kept a backup plan, because they had signed a contract from the start. Damn it, he didn't expect Dantalion to leave him with so many messes. Why would they lend money to Dantalion? Everyone knew he was an incompetent fool. Just then, he suddenly thought of something. Then he asked Lapis, "What happens if I can't repay the money?" And Lapis quickly answered, "Then you'd have to declare bankruptcy. Everything in the Demon Lord's castle would belong to the Merchant Guild. If you want to use it again, you must follow the Merchant Guild's arrangements." Sure enough, just as he expected, they had dug a trap for Dantalion. Then Dantalion asked one last question, "What day of the week is it?" Hearing this, Lapis was stunned, because she didn't understand what the Demon Lord was asking. When she looked up, she saw Dantalion emanating an incredibly powerful aura. Lapis's momentum instantly disappeared. Then he cleared his throat and rephrased, "I'm asking you what month and date it is today." This time Lapis understood his meaning, answering, "It's now April 17th, 1505. Very good, he didn't expect it was already 6 days overdue. In one more day he'd be bankrupt. Then Dantalion gave her a proposal. "I want to borrow 10,000 Demon Lord coins from your Merchant Guild as the Demon Lord." The scene shifted to the next day. A goblin was hurrying toward the conference hall. He didn't expect an emergency meeting to be called at this time. Could there be some important announcement? Soon he arrived at the Kinkuska Merchant Guild headquarters, and at this moment, everyone had already arrived at the conference hall. Someone said, "You're late, Tokul. Time is money for merchants, so let's start immediately." This person was Ivar Lothbrok, a high-ranking member of the Kenkuska Company, a vampire who had lived for over 600 years, and also one of the 3 oldest vampires. Then he had Lapis explain to everyone, but when the members below saw she was a succubus, they all protested, because someone of her bloodline shouldn't appear at the meeting. After Ivar's roar, everyone stopped their abuse, so Lapis told everyone about Dantalion wanting to continue borrowing loans. This greatly displeased Tokul, saying, "Such a small matter also requires a meeting." Seeing this, Ivar told him to calm down first, then Lapis stated Dantalion's loan amount. This stunned everyone, because 10,000 gold coins was a small country's annual income. Had he gone mad? And initially Lapis also didn't believe it, but Dantalion knew she was a smart person, so he spoke bluntly with her. "You lent money to the world's most incompetent demon lord from the start just to make me go bankrupt, then make me become the merchant guild's tool, and you wanted to get close to me through this." But Lapis directly denied his view, saying, "Everything I do is of my own free will." Dantalion's mouth curled up slightly. This woman said it without hesitation. How interesting. So this is a very profitable business. If a demon lord became your merchant guild's lackey, you would definitely receive the merchant guild's attention. Isn't that right? Then Dantalion gently lifted her chin, saying, "So will you agree to this business?" Time returned to the present. When the executives present heard Lapis's words, there was an uproar below, saying, "He can't even repay 100 gold coins. Isn't this just a trick he's playing?" Ivar smiled. Then Lapis revealed everything. It turned out Dantalion had also said something else, that in 1 month there would be a plague, and only he could find the solution. And this was also for the woman he loved. Hearing this, Tokul was stunned. He didn't understand what Lapis meant, and Lapis said, without reservation, "I've already become Dantalion's lover." This left the executives below dumbfounded. How could a low-level trash deserve to become the demon lord's lover? So they all shouted, "Throw this lunatic out." But Ivar didn't feel angry, saying, "A demon lord becoming the merchant guild's tool. All this is thanks to the lunatic you speak of. She even sacrificed her own body to become the demon lord's lover." Ivar kept laughing wildly. "What's wrong? Isn't this very good? Although we said we wouldn't lend money to this demon lord again, this is a special loan." So Ivar had Lapis return and report to the demon lord that his request had been approved. Time returned to 3 months ago. Lapis came to the continent's largest trading market, and she was purchasing these herbs according to Dantalion's requirements. But the merchant was very confused, because these herbs were just weeds to them. Lapis said, "You don't need to care about these reasons. These are just orders from Demon Lord Dantalion." Hearing it was Dantalion's request, they didn't think much of it. They were even happy. After all, only a fool like him in the world could do such things. Time quickly came to 1 month later. Lapis completed Dantalion's requirements, successfully spending 8,000 gold coins to purchase several hundred tons of weeds. Dantalion nodded with satisfaction. And she was also curious about what Dantalion would do next, spending 80% of the money on completely useless weeds. She now couldn't guess any of Dantalion's thoughts, and Dantalion told her not to worry, because the preliminary work was already completed. So Dantalion handed her a drink to celebrate, but Lapis had no mood to drink, and Dantalion sharply reminded her with his eyes, "Do you really want to refuse?" Under his insistence, Lapis finally accepted his cup, then drank it all in one gulp, and this was the first time she drank such a strange beverage. Lapis was very curious about this. Dantalion on the chair let out an evil laugh. This was precisely a drink made from black grass. Lapis cast a skeptical look, saying, "Are you joking?" But Dantalion seriously told her it was true, because he knew Lapis would definitely report his herb purchases to the company, and his ridiculous actions became a hot topic on the streets. They said, "The demon lord is truly stupid. He's really gone mad. For some hobby he doesn't even care about his life. Let's wait and see what happens next." Then he wrote a letter to Lapis. She only needed to go to this place, and could relax her body at the same time. The scene shifted. Lapis came to the traveler's bathhouse in the Sardinia kingdom. Although she completely didn't understand what Dantalion was doing, she still came to this place according to the address above, and the description of infected people he wrote. Could he really predict the plague? But Lapis knew in her heart this was impossible. How could the weakest demon lord have this ability? Just as she was peacefully enjoying the hot spring, a shout broke the quiet bathhouse. When she went to check, she saw a woman lying painfully on the ground. Her whole body was in pain, presumably from fever. But the next instant she was suddenly stunned, because the woman's body was covered with strange black spots, exactly as Dantalion described. At the same time, news of people collapsing kept coming from inside the bathhouse. In just one afternoon, the clinic received 30 patients with the same symptoms. All were people who came out of that bathhouse. And in that bathhouse, only Lapis hadn't been infected, so the doctor reminded her to quickly leave this city. Lapis thought of the potion Dantalion had given her to drink before, although she didn't want to admit it. But now only this could explain why she wasn't infected, and she also believed Dantalion's prophecy. A plague was about to sweep across the entire continent. The scene shifted to the Kunkuska Merchant Guild on July 16, 1505. An elf frantically found Tokul, who was reporting to the leader. Hearing this, Tokul angrily said, "Don't you see I'm currently meeting with Lord Payman?" However, Payman just smiled and said, "You must have very urgent business Lapis to handle. This person was none other than Payman, the 9th-ranked king of succubi. It turned out they received an emergency message from headquarters. Tokul didn't dare delay and quickly picked it up to check. When he saw the contents inside, he was in disbelief, because the letter stated that a disease with an 80% mortality rate was rapidly spreading. Watching Tokul in such panic, Payman also sensed something major had happened, so he also wanted to see the letter's contents, and he also learned about Dantalion predicting the plague and purchasing herbs at extremely low prices. Currently, the herbs in his hands were worth at least 1 to 3 million gold coins. Dantalion's behavior made Paimon find it very interesting. He wanted to know how Dantalion knew. The scene shifted to the other side. At this moment, Dantalion stood by the window watching the rolling thunder in the sky, because he knew a storm was brewing that would soon sweep across the entire continent. Then he turned and said, "You came back so quickly, didn't I tell you to relax properly?" And at this moment Lapis was frowning tightly, because she simply couldn't figure out the thoughts of this bottom-ranked demon lord before her. She said, "So you knew all along that a plague would break out in the Sardinia kingdom, and the herbs you had me collect are precisely the key medicine to treat this disease." Hearing this, Dantalion laughed loudly, saying, "Miss Lapis, I told you from the beginning that I knew what would happen from the start. In the game Dungeon Defense, the year players start the game as Imperial Year 1515. After the plague spread worldwide for a while, the world became completely dark. According to Dungeon Defense's plot, in the summer of 1505, the plague began in a hot spring town called Sardinia, and 1 year later, this black grass medicine was discovered. But before that, this herb was widely considered just a weed. Dantalion entered the game the year the plague broke out, so this was his information advantage. Plus the Kunkuska Merchant Guild's loan, he could borrow startup capital from them again. All this was thanks to Lapis. So what did the Merchant Guild think? Lapis naturally knew the Merchant Guild's situation. They had already called an emergency meeting now. Dantalion thought for a moment, saying, "Let me guess why Miss Lapis came here instead of returning to the Merchant Guild. Now you think returning to the Merchant Guild would put your life in danger. The Merchant Guild people would think predicting the plague is impossible. Someone must have deliberately spread the disease. Then they would suspect you did it. They would think you seduced the demon and became his mistress, then turned him into your lackey. Then came to the place where the plague began and harvested thousands of special herbs. For all these situations to succeed, you must be the mastermind, and you yourself know this, so you came here instead of to the Merchant Guild." At this moment, Lapis was immediately speechless, because everything in her heart seemed to be seen through. Lapis had suffered ridicule since birth, all because she was a mixed-blood human succubus. She worked hard to achieve what she had today, all to get revenge on everyone. Up to now, everything about her was seen through at a glance by the man before her. Was he still the demon lord she knew? Who was he really? At this time, Dantalion said, "Now there's only one path left for you. That's to kneel before me and become my servant. I will give you true power. I will put you in charge of everything related to the antidote. This plague will destroy the world. Even if not too many people, many will still die. Whether children or those in power, death treats everyone equally. Even those who despise you for being mixed blood will desperately search for ways to survive. Many people will want to do business with you. A mixed blood of human and succubus who was discriminated against. She will control the fate of thousands of people. Isn't this the power you want? So now please tell me your choice." Originally wanting to make the demon lord her own, now it was reversed. At this moment, she felt such a strong heartbeat for the first time. The room was unusually quiet. What choice would Lapis make? Then the corner of her mouth lifted slightly. She directly knelt on one knee before Dantalion, saying, "My life, Lapis, now belongs to His Majesty Demon Lord Dantalion." After speaking, Lapis kissed Dantalion's hand to show submission. Dantalion smiled. "Since you've given everything to me, then I will provide you with the best prospects." Time quickly came to several days later. These days Lapis had been in charge of the herb matters and taking care of Dantalion's daily life. When she knocked on the door, there was no response. Then she directly pushed open the door, because she knew Dantalion must be asleep, and the demon lord's behavior confused her. Besides eating and sleeping, the rest of his time was spent shutting himself in the library reading books. Would that demon lord Dantalion really think? Just half a year ago, Lapis went to find demon lord Dantalion for her own purposes. At that time, he still had that greedy look. For her own plan, Lapis spread the news that there was treasure in the demon lord's castle, and greedy adventurers immediately found Lapis upon hearing the rumor. The reason Lapis did this was to make Dantalion suffer a bit, to make him finally submit to her when he couldn't bear the difficulties. However, this demon lord before her had far exceeded her imagination. Now he held the lives of more than half the continent's population in his hands, yet he could still sleep peacefully in his room. Lapis had received letters from several countries, all about drug dumping. However, one thing surprised Lapis, that the Kunkuska Merchant Guild still hadn't made a move. The scene shifted to the other side. Tokul found Chairman Ivar, but the room was completely empty. Suddenly, the candles on the platform slowly lit up, and a figure appeared before Tokul. Ivar asked, "How's the situation outside now?" Then Tokul reported the current situation. The plague showed no signs of weakening. It wouldn't be long before it swept across the entire continent. According to Ivar's estimate, approximately 30% of the people were going to die. Upon hearing this, Tokul was startled. Next, Ivar planned to stop trade between the Merchant Guild and the Lords. Tokul was very angry. It was all that damned Lapis's fault. Ivar asked in confusion, What happened to her? Then Tokul told him that Lapis hadn't returned to the Merchant Guild since she left. Ivar just smiled, because he had anticipated her betrayal of the Merchant Guild all along. According to the report, Lapis was collecting herbs extensively in the very place where the plague began. As for Dantalion predicting the plague, Ivar thought it was a joke, something even gods couldn't do. How could he possibly accomplish it? So the plague was definitely created. Tokul broke out in a cold sweat and said, "Who is behind all this manipulating everything?" Lapis couldn't possibly have such capability, so Tokul speculated it might be Dantalion. However, Ivar denied it. It wouldn't be him, they're merely pawns in her hands. Tokul said, "Could there really be someone in the world who can control the spread of plague?" In Ivar's impression, there was one person who could easily accomplish this feat. She was known as the goddess of black magic and plague, the 8th-ranked demon lord Barbados. Barbados really might do such a thing, because she deeply despised humans. Once this plague spread, the harm it caused to humans would far exceed the harm to demons. Tokul immediately inquired, what should the Ivar Merchant Guild do next? The Merchant Guild maintained good relationships with numerous demon lords, which allowed the guild to grow gradually. If we plan to deal with a demon lord, the Merchant Guild must have sufficient evidence. But Ivar just smiled. He had already prepared a grand chess game. Then Ivar had a nearby servant come over, because he was going to convene a trial assembly. Ivar said, "Tokul, go tell Her Highness the Princess everything, because the only person who can deal with the demon Barbados is Lord Paimon." Tokul knew that Paimon's relationship with Barbados wasn't good, so he would definitely cooperate with the Merchant Guild. The next instant, Ivar disappeared. He was very angry about Lapis's betrayal, so he had already listed Lapis as his next collectible. The scene shifted, looking at the sleeping Dantalion. Lapis still woke him up because they suddenly received an invitation. All the demon lords received Ivar's invitation to Walpurgis Night. A few days later, several witches were moving in one direction. They were precisely going to pick up the demon lord to attend the gathering. This time, the one they were picking up was demon lord Dantalion. The witches had also heard about him and the mixed-blood succubus Lapis. They found this forbidden love quite interesting. As such, they were curious about what kind of person Dantalion was. At the same time, Lapis was urging Dantalion to leave the castle because today they were going to attend Walpurgis Night. However, Dantalion obviously didn't want to attend this kind of gathering. He thought such gatherings were extremely boring. After all, he didn't even know what Walpurgis Night was. Lapis glanced at Dantalion, then explained the content of this gathering to him. Walpurgis Night was an important event where demons and their followers gathered. They solved problems that transcended national boundaries together to maintain world order. Almost all demon lords would attend, but Dantalion still wasn't interested. Lapis frowned. She said, "Presumably this time's topic will be the plague. The location is Niflheim. It's precisely where the Kunkuska Merchant Guild's headquarters is located. The ones who initiated Walpurgis Night are very likely them. You now monopolize the special herbs for treating the plague. If you don't attend, they will use this as an excuse to crusade against you." Hearing this, Dantalion became serious, because he had almost overlooked one thing. If they used force, he would be unable to resist. Then he said, "Then let us attend this Walpurgis Night." The reason Dantalion was attending was because he still had one trump card. That was Lapis. This was why he was willing to spend big money to hire her. At the same time, Dantalion was puzzled. He said, "How are we going to reach Niflheim?" At this moment, Lapis checked the time. They should arrive very soon. The next second, a song drifted over. When Dantalion looked up, he discovered 5 witches circling in the sky. This startled him quite a bit. Soon the witches jumped down from above. They said, "We're delighted to serve you, respected Lord Demon Lord. We are the Bebel sisters." Seeing this, Dantalion asked Lapis, "They look just like children. Can they really do this?" Lapis glared at him and said, "You can't judge by appearances. They stopped growing after making contracts with demons. They're over 200 years older than us." Dantalion looked incredulous. Then he cleared his throat. He said, "I'm truly sorry. I was too rash just now. I sincerely thank you for accepting my request. I'll leave everything to you from now on." And seeing Dantalion being so polite, the witches were very touched, because to demon lords, they were just tools. Very few people would be so polite to them. Then one witch chanted a spell. The next instant, a chair appeared out of thin air. Dantalion, riding this kind of flying vehicle for the first time, was quite worried. He asked, "Is this really safe?" The witch told him to relax. After all, they were professionals. After a 6-hour journey, Dantalion arrived at Niflheim's plaza. As thanks, Dantalion wanted to invite the sisters to dinner together. Hearing this, the Bebel sisters were also very happy. After all, dining with a demon lord was their honor. Then they introduced the town's restaurants to Dantalion. However, Lapis interrupted him because she worried there might be traps. Seeing this, Dantalion gestured for her to relax. No one dared to move against a demon lord in town. After hearing this, Lapis didn't say anything more. The town plaza was very lively. No matter what race, all could coexist harmoniously. They could fully enjoy their current lives. Just as the group was preparing to enter the tavern, a scream attracted Dantalion's attention. A man was punching and kicking an old man. However, not a single person dared to step forward and stop it. When Dantalion looked over, he discovered it was a man with horns. He was the 72nd ranked demon lord. Andronalphus. In the game, both Dantalion and he were bosses in the tutorial levels. Two demon lords ranked at the bottom. At this moment, he thought of an interesting plan. The game Dungeon Defense was a story about 72 demon lords ruling the world. When the protagonist was still a child, his village was destroyed by a demon lord. Many years later, the protagonist grew up and became a hero. His goal was to defeat the demon lords. The game began in 1515. Right now was exactly 10 years before the game started, and the one who destroyed the protagonist's village created the opportunity for the hero's birth. He was precisely the 72nd ranked demon lord Andronalphus. But if I did something to make him die, thus preventing the hero's birth, I think life afterward should become much easier. Then Dantalion slowly raised his wine glass, then dropped it down heavily, only hearing a bang sound. Andronalphus was very puzzled by this. When he turned around to look, he discovered someone was staring at him. He said very displeasedly, "You damned bastard dare to look at me like this." Seeing him fall into his trap, Dantalion's lips curved up slightly. This made Andronalphus even angrier. At the same time, Dantalion asked Lapis if there was any army protecting Andronalphus. As far as Lapis knew, he didn't have one, because he always stayed in gambling houses. Just an evil spirit who used his identity to oppress ordinary people. The shame of demon lords. Seeing the horns on Dantalion's head, Andronalphus hesitated for a moment. He was also a demon lord. Then he also noticed that Lapis behind him was a mixed-blood succubus. Seeing the furious Andronalphus, Lapis reminded Dantalion not to conflict with him, because there were laws protecting demon lords. Demon lords were even higher than nobles because they possessed the power to destroy the world, so the lords established laws to avoid fighting each other. Anyone who struck first would be punished. Hearing this, Dantalion smiled. Soon Andronalphus came before Dantalion. He inquired about Dantalion's name in a very arrogant tone. Similarly, Dantalion also displayed the manner of a demon lord, saying, "Seeing you acting superior in front of the weak makes me feel disgusted, so please get out of my sight." Hearing this, Andronalphus froze for a moment. Then he clenched his fist and attacked toward Dantalion. When Lapis wanted to step forward to stop him, however, she was stopped by Dantalion. As long as he made a move, then Dantalion would have the opportunity to punish him. But his fist stopped less than 10 centimeters away. He said, "I recently heard a story about a demon lord dating a lowly mixed-blood succubus. I didn't expect I would meet you here, Dantalion." Dantalion thought he was a fool, but it seemed he wasn't completely one. Andronalphus patted Dantalion's shoulder and said, "I almost violated the law. Demon lords are forbidden from attacking each other. If I hadn't known you were Dantalion, I think I would have been fooled." Then he laughed loudly, saying, "Did you really think I would fall for your trick?" Facing Andronalphus's mockery, Dantalion didn't speak. Soon, Andronalphus turned his gaze toward Lapis beside him. He said, "Filthy street rat, you emanate the particular stench of the lower class." Andronalphus pointed his finger at Lapis and said, "How did you make that idiot fall in love with you? Could it be there's something special here?" Lapis told him to shut up in an icy tone. However, this attitude made Andronalphus very displeased. Then he called out to Dantalion, saying, "The law only applies between demon lords. In other words, I can attack anyone other than lords." Andronalphus clenched his fist and viciously attacked toward Lapis. Everyone present was shocked. He mockingly taunted Dantalion. "After I beat this woman to a pulp, I'll send her back to you." Facing Andronalphus, who was provoking him like this, Dantalion showed no change whatsoever. Andronalphus said, "I won't show mercy to anyone who dares oppose me." He continuously ravaged Lapis's body, but even so, Lapis didn't make any sounds of pain. Soon she climbed back up. Her eyes hadn't changed from beginning to end. Andronalphus said, "You dare to glare at me like that." Andronalphus swung his fist again. This time Lapis didn't fall. Lapis had lived in the slums as a mixed blood since childhood, so she was already accustomed to being beaten. Andronalphus's violent fists were just routine for her former self. Andronalphus roared angrily, "I am the noble demon lord of this world. You lowly slave dare to look down on me." At the same time, Dantalion took a small knife from the tabletop. At this moment, Andronalphus was already gasping for breath. What was wrong with this filthy trash? Why did she still have this expression? Andronalphus was going crazy inside. "Damned bastard, I'm going to kill you now." But before he could react, a dagger directly slashed across his cheek. This scene shocked everyone present again. Andronalphus's screams echoed throughout the entire plaza. Dantalion glanced at Andronalphus crouching on the ground. Lapis nervously looked at Dantalion, thinking, doesn't he know what this means? However, the next instant, Dantalion walked to Lapis's front. He pulled her into his embrace. Lapis had never imagined a demon lord would hold her in his arms. Dantalion took out his superb acting skills, speaking to her a sacred declaration of love. After finishing, he gently lifted Lapis's right hand. He said, "I had wanted to find a more suitable occasion to give this to you, but right now I want to put it on you." Lapis couldn't believe her own eyes either, because a sparkling ring had appeared on her hand. Dantalion raised Lapis's hand to declare her identity to everyone. "I am the demon lord Dantalion, and this young lady is a lowborn. We two are not allowed to be united. But now I make a vow before the goddess Aphrodite. I, Dantalion, the 71st ranked demon lord, declare my love for this girl. This ring is the proof, even if this society forbids our union. Our hearts are already tightly bound together, yet this Andronalphus dared to hurt my beloved. I, Demon Lord Dantalion, will absolutely not forgive his atrocity, even if he is a demon lord. Everyone's view of this bottom-ranked demon lord underwent a complete transformation. He actually dared to violate the demon lord laws for his beloved. Under such a magnificent act, no one noticed the change in Dantalion's expression. Things were beginning to develop in an interesting direction. He turned the entire plaza into his stage. He said, "You all obey such an unreasonable demon lord. How much longer will you grovel before him? Do you truly have no objections? If justice truly exists in this world, shouldn't this person receive judgment?" Andronalphus painfully covered his eye. He said, "Judgment? You're only one rank higher than me. Just a small fry whose head has been turned by power. You violated the law by attacking me. I will definitely make you pay a painful price." At this moment, Andronalphus kept roaring. However, this behavior became the catalyst for his descent to hell. Looking at the crazed Andronalphus, Dantalion said, "Still so arrogant even now, it seems you haven't realized your mistake." Dantalion raised his hand high. He shouted, "People of Niflheim, now in the name of a demon lord, I pronounce judgment upon him. I will hand the judgment authority to you to be executed by the people's will. The reason we demon lords can survive now is because of you, because of all of you." Dantalion's words made the lower class people feel their own existence. Their emotions had been ignited. Dantalion continued, "He is a demon lord, yet he doesn't understand what true power is. More importantly, he hasn't fulfilled his duties as a demon lord, but instead spent his time drinking and gambling. This isn't how a demon lord should be. The world doesn't exist because of people like him. It exists for you. On this land, the people are the future, so does someone like this really deserve to live? Now is the time to rise up." Dantalion's passionate speech completely ignited the people's discontent. Dantalion continued, "Heroes of Niflheim, stand up!" Soon a long sword pierced into Andronalphus's body, and the one holding the sword was precisely the old man from before. He couldn't see anything. Then Dantalion patted his shoulder. He said, "So far, everything has gone according to my plan. You can die in peace now." At this moment, Andronalphus began to feel afraid, because he had encountered a true demon, a demon hidden in darkness that couldn't be seen. When Dantalion walked out of the crowd, those who had been bullied by Andronalphus all picked up weapons to hack at him. His screams echoed throughout the entire Niflheim plaza, but soon it returned to silence. At this time, the witches called out to Dantalion. They said, "We're a bit tired, so we can only have dinner with you next time. We're very sorry about this." Dantalion looked back and discovered that of the 5 witches just now, one person was missing. They speculated she might have some urgent matter, but Dantalion felt things weren't that simple. However, this wasn't anything important either. Then Dantalion called out to the witches saying, "There's one more thing I'd like to ask your help with." The Bebel sisters looked at him with puzzled faces. The departed witch was savoring Dantalion's performance just now. She found it very interesting. An even bigger stage was coming next. She looked forward to Dantalion's performance. At the same time, Tokul went to Ivar's room. It had been a week since he last came here. Tonight was Walpurgis night. Tokul, standing at the door, called out Ivar's name but got no response, so he slowly pushed open the door. What met his eyes was a row of coffins. Tokul was very puzzled. Could it be that Mr. Ivar hasn't returned yet? But just then, a laugh startled him. When he looked up, he discovered a witch sitting on the windowsill. However, when she jumped down, Tokul called out Ivar's name, because she was precisely the toy Ivar's consciousness was controlling. Tokul said, "Mr. Ivar, where have you been all this time?" During this time, Ivar had been monitoring the outside movements. Today he even visited Dantalion and Lapis, which gave him quite a harvest. Tokul said, "Did you discover something?" However, Ivar said, "Not about the plague, but I did witness some very interesting things. Presumably we all underestimated Dantalion. He must still be immersed in the thrill of love, which means his weakness is Lapis." Then Ivar inquired about Lord Paymon's situation. Tokul said, "Lord Paymon said she would spare no effort to help us." Ivar was very satisfied with this. Then he opened a coffin. After covering it with the lid, the coffin on the other side emitted a dark purple energy, which was precisely Ivar's soul. When his soul returned to its place, Ivar's other body awakened. Ivar said, "Tokul, help me convey everything just now to Lord Paymon. The day I've been anticipating has finally come. Those who betrayed me, I will settle accounts with you." The scene shifted to the second evening, the first day of Walpurgis night. The gathering welcomed the First Lord. As the luxurious carriage slowly stopped, a woman holding a fan who looked very elegant appeared before everyone. She was precisely the 9th-ranked demon Lord Paymon. When Paymon looked around, she discovered there were no familiar figures nearby, which meant she was the first to arrive. At the same time, a noisy sound came over. The next demon lord had arrived. Due to the carriage's rapid speed, the horse's sudden braking sound echoed throughout the entire plaza. As soon as the carriage stopped, the door was kicked open. Due to sitting too long, this demon lord's mood at this moment was very bad. This person was precisely the 8th-ranked lord, Barbados. She was known as the goddess of black magic and plague. Seeing her mortal enemy beside her, Barbados was very displeased. She said, "No wonder I smelled feces as soon as I got off the carriage. Turns out there's a sow here." Paymon's pupils contracted as she looked toward Barbados beside her. Then she opened her fan and laughed. "Isn't this Barbados? Your taste is still as questionable as ever. Barbados stroked her silver-white hair, saying, I heard you really enjoy sleeping with centaurs, Paimon said with a gloomy face, speaking such indecent words in this situation. Can't you act like an adult? But with that figure of yours, it's hard to find a suitable partner, which means you might forever be a child who can't grow up. Can you stop venting your inferiority complex on others? Paimon's words directly hit Barbados's sore spot. Barbados said angrily, Damn bastard, get down here now, I'm going to chop you into pieces right away. In this tense atmosphere, the gathering welcomed another demon lord. The two were also attracted by the carriage on this side. The arrival was precisely the 71st ranked demon lord Dantalion and his beloved Lapis. Dantalion wanted to hold Lapis's hand as they descended, but Lapis had no reaction. Everyone thought the previous rumors were false. They didn't expect the two's forbidden love was real. At the same time, Lapis noticed the white-haired girl beside them. Then she called out to Dantalion, but Dantalion just smiled, because he knew all the people here. At this moment, both Paimon and Barbados noticed Dantalion. Dantalion comforted Lapis, Don't be afraid, they won't do anything to us. Time returned to 30 minutes earlier. Lapis originally didn't want to attend the gathering but was still pulled onto the carriage by Dantalion. Dantalion said, As I understand it, there's a ball before the meeting. If you don't come, who will be my dance partner? Do you want me to go alone? However, Lapis just quietly looked at him. Dantalion knew Lapis was still considering yesterday's matter. Lapis thought Dantalion was crazy, but Dantalion just replied with one sentence, I had no choice. And Lapis's face gradually reddened, because she knew Dantalion stood up for her. Then Lapis explained, This gathering is only for demon lords and high-level demons to attend. People like me aren't allowed to set foot in such places. Hearing this, Dantalion directly interrupted her, saying, You are now officially my fiancé, so don't be afraid. We are now the most watched couple in the world. Don't disappoint those who are looking forward to seeing us. Lapis lowered her head slightly. She didn't understand how things had become like this. She thought becoming the demon lord's lover was just an excuse for him to borrow money. However, this matter had directly affected thousands upon thousands of people. This time's theme was the plague, and there was yesterday's incident. Lapis didn't understand how Dantalion could be so calm. A moment later, their carriage finally arrived at the venue. Dantalion directly stood up. Then he got off the carriage first before Lapis. Then he extended his hand toward Lapis. And Lapis was also stunned for a moment. She declined Dantalion's enthusiasm and got down from the side, saying, Thank you very much, but I can manage. However, Dantalion just showed a meaningful smile. He said, No matter, let us enter the venue. Then they saw the confrontational Paimon and Barbados. Dantalion gentlemanly gave greetings to both Lady Paimon and Lady Barbados. Hello, I am the 71st ranked demon lord Dantalion. But Barbados said very displeasedly, Don't talk to me like that, you low-grade trash. Hearing this, Dantalion didn't show dissatisfaction, but was even more respectful, saying, I apologize for my behavior. I've never met such high-level people as you two, so I had to greet you. If I offended you, I sincerely apologize. Barbados looked at Dantalion with contemptuous eyes. She said, Fine, you guys are really too boring. Then she turned and left. Seeing this, Lapis also felt it was incredible. After all, Barbados was famously bad-tempered. At this moment, Barbados had also become interested in Dantalion, because Dantalion's composed and calm appearance didn't seem like an act. She developed a strong interest in this. Just after Barbados left, Paimon called out to Dantalion. After Ivor told her everything he had seen and heard, she had also become interested in Dantalion. She said, I've heard much about you. I presume the one behind you must be... Lapis knelt on one knee and said, Honorable Lord Paimon, I am the one serving Lord Dantalion. My name is Lapis. Paimon laughed lightly and closed her fan. Then she slowly came before Lapis. Then she used the fan in her hand to lift Lapis's face, saying, Such a young and beautiful face. If the answer wasn't good, it would make her unhappy. Dantalion bowed slightly. Lady Paimon, no one dares compare with your beauty. Hearing this, the corners of Paimon's mouth curved up. She said, My, that sounds so nice. Looking carefully, you're quite handsome yourself, aren't you? Then Paimon walked to Dantalion's side and said, I'd really like to have a long talk with you, but we'll still have opportunities, so let's meet again at the venue. Until they watched Paimon leave, neither of them spoke. Dantalion used his hand to cover his face, hiding his inner excitement. Things were getting more and more interesting. When he turned to look at Lapis, he discovered her complexion wasn't right. After all, the pressure from the person just now was really too great. Time quickly came to evening. At this moment, basically all the demon lords in the venue had arrived. After entering the venue, Dantalion sensed something wrong, although these people didn't blatantly stare at him. But looking carefully, everyone's gazes seemed to fall on the two of them. However, this wasn't anything strange, but the problem lay in their gazes. Their gazes were like a pride of lions staring at two little white rabbits. Then Dantalion inquired of Lapis, Are all these people related to the Merchant Guild? Lapis definitely didn't know the exact list, but looking at the participants list made it clear. 40% of the people were on Paimon's side. Another 40% were Barbados's. The remaining 20% were Marbas's. Dantalion quickly sorted out the relationships. How many among this group would be the Merchant Guild's lackeys? If it were my company, How would I escape before this pack of wolves? Just then, all the candles in the venue extinguished. Then ghostly blue flames rose into the air one by one. A man slowly emerged from the darkness. He said, "I'm delighted everyone could come to attend Walpurgis Night. I'm tonight's host, Ivar, and also the person in charge of the Kunkuska Merchant Guild." Ivar was also one of the characters in the game. His character design made Dantalion feel very interesting. He wanted to see what would happen in this ballroom. Ivar was the wealthiest person in the demon world, a vampire who had lived for a very long time. Because of Dantalion, Lapis betrayed her previous employer. At the same time, Ivar also noticed Dantalion and Lapis beside them. Lapis was much smarter than he imagined. Not only did she break away from the Merchant Guild, she also became the Demon Lord's lover. But even so, he would personally witness the downfall of both. Just as Ivar announced Walpurgis Night officially beginning, Barbados interrupted him saying, "Old man, you've been droning on for quite a while." All gazes fixed on her, she said, "I experienced a long journey, let me rest for a bit. Having a smelly old man as host is really boring, I can't stand your dull hosting." When Ivar came out to explain, Barbados directly interrupted him saying, "Old man, are you challenging me?" Ivar hastily apologized. Pure-blooded vampires were nobles among nobles, but their status was still below demon lords. At this time, tittering came from the side, saying, "Barbatos, you need to see your position clearly. I'm ashamed to be the same race as you. Ivar prepared this wonderful place for us. What more are you dissatisfied with?" Barbados poured the last few drops of wine into her mouth. She said, "You damned bitch." Then she threw the wine bottle hard on the ground, continuing, "Go home and play with your centaurs, don't put on airs." Payman's voice also became stern. "My god, how vulgar. Is it because you look like a child? You seem to only have a child's brain too. You pitiful creature, adults understand etiquette, but I think that's something you'll never understand." Barbados clenched her teeth. She hated most when people called her a child. Payman showed a mocking expression she couldn't help. "What's wrong? Are you angry?" The only person this woman despised was Barbados. At this time, the atmosphere between the two could ignite the entire gathering at any moment. Just then, a hoarse voice made both calm down. "You two both calm down." This person was precisely the 5th-ranked Demon Lord Marbas. A higher-ranked Demon Lord had spoken, the two could only let it rest. Marbas continued, "Sorry, Sir Ivar, please continue hosting the following evening party." Ivar said, "Now that everyone has arrived, I once again announce Walpurgis Night officially begins." At this moment, Dantalion couldn't stop trembling. His heart was very excited, because this was a stage, a big stage where he could perform to his heart's content. Gathered here were true Demon Lords, and Dantalion was just bottom-ranked trash. If he took one wrong step, these people could easily tear him to shreds. If I were Ivar, I would make all the high-level demon lords and other participants stand on my side, then watch my prey be devoured. While doing this, I'd position myself in a safe place. But Dantalion inexplicably felt uneasy in his heart. At the same time, Paimon looked around. An ominous premonition surged in Dantalion's heart, because she seemed to be staring at him. Paimon said, before discussing tonight's topic, "There's one matter we must handle first." Ivar also echoed along. "Respected Lord Paimon, what important matter is it exactly?" All gazes focused on Paimon again. Paimon said, "I believe everyone present knows about it. The news of Andronalphus being dismembered in the plaza. I have some useful information about this matter." Andronalphus was deliberately murdered. Ivar also displayed a shocked expression, asking, "Is it true?" The ominous premonition came true. She was indeed staring at him. Dantalion was puzzled why she would make things difficult for him. Marbas, upon hearing, was also very angry, asking, "Who is the murderer?" Paimon, as if on a stage, said, "The murderers were the people of Niflheim." Marbas was also stunned. How could it be ordinary people? But Paimon's words hadn't finished. She continued, "Someone deliberately incited the people of Niflheim. More importantly, that person is now with us." Lapis's complexion instantly turned pale. However, Dantalion didn't feel panicked. Paimon obviously wanted to crush him, so he deduced that Paimon and Ivar's merchant guild must have cooperation, and they knew what happened yesterday. But why would they know so clearly? Yesterday they happened to go to that place, so from when did they start monitoring him? The only possibility was that they had been monitoring him from the very beginning. But if that was the case, another question arose. How did they watch? And from where did they watch? A heated debate broke out among the demon lords. He needed to clear his mind as quickly as possible. A flash of inspiration struck, and Dantalion connected everything together. If that was the case, everything made sense. Ivar was quite an excellent hunter. The two sang in harmony, guiding the demon lords present. Then Ivar opened his mouth to ask Paimon who had incited the people to kill Andrialphus. Paimon gently tapped her palm with her fan. Her tone became even heavier. The one who deceived the people with clever words was the 71st-ranked demon lord, Dantalion. In an instant, all eyes in the venue fell on Dantalion in unison. Dantalion knew this woman had prepared everything. From the beginning of the incident to the end, she had planned every step. Marbas asked Paimon again if it was true, because this matter could shake the order of the entire demon world. And Paimon swore to the demon lord, "Every word I say is true. I hereby accuse demon lord Dantalion of committing this crime and propose holding a hearing." Ivar revealed a victorious smile, as he had already prepared the evidence. Ivar tapped the floor with his cane. He said, "Mr. Dantalion, do you have any objections?" In Ivar's view, there was no way Dantalion could escape today. So how would Dantalion refute this inevitable losing situation? However, Dantalion said, I have no objections. He admitted to it straightforwardly. He continued, just as Lady Payman said, it was I who incited the people to kill Andrialphus. Dantalian's answer was beyond everyone's expectations. Just moments ago, Dantalian had connected everything that happened after leaving the dungeon. Finally, it formed a complete puzzle. He deduced that they had joined forces with Paimon, using the Andrialphus incident as an excuse to destroy him. In order to obtain the herbs for the Black Death, they knew everything, so they used a demon lord's death. However, Dantalian going to the plaza was just a coincidence, and he accidentally ran into Andrialphus, so they couldn't have known. The only explanation was that they had been monitoring his every move from the very beginning, and that person who had been watching him mysteriously disappeared yesterday. So, what was the reason for their surveillance? Dantalian thought for a long time. If they had Paimon from the start, directly attacking Dantalian would have been better, especially since he was still a low-ranking demon lord. The only explanation was that they couldn't do that. Why go through all the trouble of convening a meeting to do these things? Dantalian got the answer from Paimon. Since he arrived at the venue, he had noticed the gazes of those around him. Although it seemed like they were looking at him, they actually weren't. So who exactly were they looking at? Thinking logically, predicting a plague was completely impossible. So they also thought that someone had deliberately created the plague. But who would do such a thing? The first person Dantalian thought of was someone Paimon had always hated, the necromancer and god of plague, Demon Lord Barbatos. Paimon and Ivar must have believed Barbatos was the mastermind behind the plague. They must have thought that the 71st ranked Dantalian was just Barbatos' puppet. They watched Dantalian to figure out his relationship with Barbatos. If they attacked Dantalian, it might lead to a war with Barbatos. So they brought Dantalian to this place with many demon lords and nobles. They thought that by attacking Dantalian, he would confess his relationship with Barbatos. However, with so many demon lords and nobles here, Barbatos might deny his relationship with Dantalian. Then she couldn't help him anymore, and what remained was to bring Dantalian to justice, because he caused the plague and stole the cure for it. Ivar was a very cunning fellow, but Dantalian had to admire his ability. However, Dantalian didn't care about these things. If their target was Barbatos, that meant Barbatos wasn't one of them. What about Marbas? Presumably not either. Marbas was a high-ranking demon lord. If he knew, he would directly ask Barbatos. In other words, only the two of them were here to find fault with Barbatos, because they felt the two of them were enough to deal with trash like Dantalian. Having sorted all this out, Dantalian was also prepared to show them something. He wouldn't let their plan proceed so smoothly. Meanwhile, Ivar asked Dantalian again if he agreed with what Paimon said. Dantalian nodded and said, "That's right, that's what I mean." This left Ivar not knowing what to do next. What was this guy thinking? Then Dantalian changed the subject. "I did this for my own reasons, so please hold the hearing as planned." In a difficult position, Ivar could only agree to Dantalian's proposal. The seemingly fair Ivar had always been working for his own benefit, so Dantalian wanted to drag him down from that position. Then, he called out to Marbas. He said, "In a dispute between demon lords, isn't it natural to have someone act as judge? You are the highest ranking demon lord here, so please take on this role." Marbas's position was placed at the highest point, so naturally he wouldn't pass up this opportunity. Marbas said, "Lord Ivar, this matter is too difficult for you to handle. I will take over as host. Do you mind?" Ivar had no choice but to hand over the position to Marbas. Then Marbas turned his gaze to Paimon across from him. In response, Paimon couldn't refuse either, so Marbas became the arbiter of this matter, and he wouldn't favor either side. From the moment Dantalian admitted it just now, the initiative had completely fallen back into his hands, and the venue before him would become his stage for performance. Then Dantalian asked Lapis how the preparation of that matter was going. Lapis nodded and said, "Everything is ready." After that, Dantalian told her to act on his signal. Lapis was shocked. She hadn't expected that in this situation, Dantalian could still smile. Paimon looked at Dantalian with a gloomy face. She hadn't expected to lose the initiative, and next, she would thoroughly enjoy this game of wits. Dantalian slowly walked forward, stepping out with a somewhat nervous yet composed gait. Paimon revealed a perverse smile, trying to provoke him, but he didn't care at all and returned the smile. He said, "Earlier at the door, you said you want to have a good talk with me." At this moment, the two were like medieval knights in a duel to the death, both risking their lives to end the other, until one side died. With Marbas's announcement, the duel between the two officially began. The demon lords at the ball gradually gathered over, like crowds watching a boxing match, taking turns sizing up the two on stage with interested eyes. The way to win this confrontation was also simple. The side with the highest number of votes would be the winner. It seemed very fair, but in reality, it was a competition of power. Lapis had mentioned earlier that 40% of the people were on Paimon's side. Dantalian knew his current power was weak, far inferior to Paimon's. At present, his ability was the knowledge gained in the dungeon defense, the Apostle of Aphrodite, which allowed him to see others' favorability toward him. Dantalian had used it in the castle tutorial, and when it reached the highest level, he could even read others' thoughts. But now it was still level 1, so he could only see favorability. However, for Dantalian, this was already enough. Marbas said, "First, I will grant the right to question Dantalian, so Plaintiff Paimon will speak first." Paimon questioned Dantalian again about whether he was at Niflheim Plaza this morning, and despite knowing the other party was a demon lord, he still incited the people to kill Andrialphus. Am I wrong? Dantalian affirmed this, saying, "You're not wrong, but I can answer even more accurately. Though you may have already realized this. Before the people killed him, I personally gouged out his eyes with my own hands." Hearing this, the demon lords below were all stunned. Had he forgotten demon law? Dantalian continued, "Even if the people hadn't been able to kill him, regardless of whether he was a demon lord or not, I would still have dug out that bastard's heart and cut off his head." Hearing these words, the demon lord's favorability toward Dantalian fluctuated wildly. However, his behavior greatly satisfied Ivar. This guy must have gone mad. Otherwise, how could he say such things? Paimon said, "To dare call a noble demon lord trash, you should watch your words." However, Dantalian's momentum showed no signs of weakening. "I'm truly sorry, I cannot do that. I will still call him trash. Trash like him deserved to die. This was his deserved fate." The noise below grew louder and louder. Had this guy completely lost his mind? Paimon appeared very angry and said, "Watch your language. He was still one of us." However, Dantalian directly denied it. "I'm sorry, that trash was not one of us. He was a disgrace to demon lords. Even though he was killed, he didn't die enough. I hope the demons of hell continue to torment that bastard's soul forever. Honestly, I hate that you're protecting that trash, Lady Paimon." Paimon opened her mouth and said, "Such audacity, Dantalian. I can accuse you again for contempt of court. Please change the way you speak." At this moment, the atmosphere in the venue was very tense. Dantalian checked the favorability. Everyone's favorability toward him was declining. Even Marbas stood up to tell him to watch his language. Seeing Marbas stand up, the corners of Dantalian's mouth lifted slightly. He said, "I'm truly sorry. I seem unable to control my emotions. These people's favorability wasn't his target." So from the beginning, Dantalian had been deliberately provoking Paimon. From the results, the effect was quite good, because his target had been clear from the start: Demon Lord Barbatos. At this moment, Barbatos's favorability toward Dantalian had increased by 50 points. The winner would be decided by votes. 40% of people supported Paimon, 20% supported Marbas, and another 40% supported Barbatos. In other words, attracting Barbatos's attention to Dantalian was crucial. So just now, he had answered all of Paimon's questions, using this method to upset her. Although Dantalian wanted to know what Barbatos was feeling now, she probably wanted to strike at Paimon, and Dantalian would be the one to crush her. Next would be the true performance time belonging to Dantalian. Just then, Dantalian offered Paimon his most sincere apology. Hearing this, Paimon was puzzled, because she realized the person before her was a very difficult opponent. Dantalian bent his waist to 60 degrees in a deep bow. He said, "Please forgive my rudeness. I want to apologize to everyone present." The demon lords present felt puzzled, because they didn't know why Dantalian was apologizing. Dantalian continued, "I meant no disrespect whatsoever. I am an immature man who cannot even control himself. I am only ranked 71st, with no achievements, no title, nothing at all. However, I would never lay a hand on a frail old person, never kill a child." At this moment, the demon lords were confused, because they didn't understand what Dantalian was saying. Even Marbas was the same. Dantalian covered his emotions with his hand. To outsiders, he seemed in great pain and suffering. He continued, "Don't you know, Andrialphus killed no fewer than 54 people in Niflheim." The demon lords were once again shocked by Dantalian's words. He continued, "Among them, 12 children were whipped to death directly by Andrialphus. When I was walking on the street, an old man said his daughter was raped and her body was found in the sewers. If you count the injured, the number of victims reached 327. This is just what we know." At this moment, even Paimon was somewhat shocked, because this was an unexpected development. Then Marbas sternly asked Dantalian if the situation was true. Dantalian affirmed it. To be absolutely certain, he had Lapis investigate this morning. Although he wasn't completely sure, Andrialphus didn't disappoint him. Though what he said just now was somewhat exaggerated. Dead men's mouths don't speak. Dantalian said, "Yesterday I heard an old man's painful scream. I turned around, and Andrialphus began cursing at me. Then he approached me, and after discovering I was a demon lord, he didn't dare attack me, but he turned his spear toward my beloved, and my beloved was punched and kicked by him. When she stood up, he punched her in the face again and again, swinging his fists repeatedly. Please tell me, Lady Paimon, what do you think should be done in that situation? Seeing the person I love suffer such unreasonable violence, should I just stand by and watch?" At this moment, Paimon was speechless. This was a moral stance issue, because Dantalian understood Paimon. Unlike other demon lords, she was particularly friendly to humans in the game. Unlike Ivar, her actions might purely stem from concern for those suffering from the plague, believing Dantalian and Barbatos were the culprits. Paimon's sense of justice was admirable. However, this sense of justice could be a weakness. In this situation, it was a double-edged sword. From now on, what followed would be a public execution. Meanwhile, Dantalian once again broke the quiet atmosphere, passionately speaking from the heart. That person was a bastard, unworthy of being called a demon lord. If things could have continued as they are now, the number of victims would continue to increase. Those innocent people who were killed had committed no crimes. So regardless of whether that bastard should have lived, Lady Payman, do you still think he was one of us? Even if the image of all demon lords would be tarnished because of him, would you still defend him? Dantalian extended his hand toward Paimon, and all eyes focused on her once again. Please give us a clear answer. At this moment, Paimon was drenched in cold sweat. Because of her identity and her pride as a demon lord, she couldn't possibly associate with such a person. Paimon was so nervous she could barely breathe. After all, every gaze here was cold. Just then, a mocking laugh came from the side. Well said, 71st Demon Lord, on behalf of all of us, I thank you for eliminating that pest. Fellows, don't you all think so? Looking at the wildly laughing Barbados, Ivar also realized the seriousness of the situation. Lapis was also completely bewildered. She had never imagined such an outcome. The 8th-ranked Barbados was actually standing on their side. She said, "Are you really going to defend that bastard's actions?" Barbados turned to look at the faction behind him. Although they were also bewildered, they still applauded. Barbados was very satisfied with this. He said, "It seems today is a beautiful day. I suppose you must have discovered something, but you want to defend that trash on Walpurgis night. The other demon lords and nobles will mock you." Barbados pointed to Dantalian beside him and said, "I'm now certain that he must have received praise from the people of Niflheim, because he broke the law for the person he loved and eliminated a filthy bastard. He's a hero. A demon lord became a hero. Don't you think so, Paimon?" Listening to the applause coming from all around, Paimon's mind was in complete chaos. She knew Dantalian had clearly violated demon law, but the outcome shouldn't be like this. Looking at the noisy venue, Marbus immediately said, "Everyone silence." The applause just now was deliberately disrupting the hearing, so don't let this happen again. Barbados could only say, "I apologize, because I was moved by that speech just now. Among the lowest-ranking demon lords, there's usually only trash. It's been a long time since I've seen someone useful. I didn't mean to disrupt the hearing." To this, Marbus said nothing more. Then he turned back to look at Paimon behind him and said, "Paimon, let's end the hearing here." However, Paimon hadn't given up. She said, "Please wait, Mr. Marbus." Marbus frowned, because he was giving Paimon a way out. Marbus said, "Is there something else you want to discuss?" Paimon said, "I haven't finished questioning Dantalian." Marbus reminded Paimon again, "You and I have known each other for over 500 years. You know me, and I know you. However, I don't understand why you want to defend Andrielphus. Normally, you would despise such a person." Paimon tightly gripped the fan in her hand, breaking into a cold sweat. Then she looked at Barbados behind her. She was puzzled about why Barbados would make such an expression. What was so funny? Then she looked at Dantalian beside her. At this moment, Paimon thought of another possibility, that the two of them weren't working together at all. Then she directly knelt before Marbus. She said, "Please, Mr. Marbus, give me one last chance." And Marbus knew Paimon was about to play her final card. So he said, "Please, go ahead, Lady Paimon." Dantalian on the side revealed a meaningful smile, because all of this was within his expectations. Meanwhile, Dantalian looked at Lapis behind him, and made the gesture they had agreed upon earlier. After seeing the gesture, Lapis left without looking back. To ensure absolute certainty, he had also prepared a trump card. At this moment, Paimon stared at Dantalian like a demon. She said, "Distinguished guests of Walpurgis night, I haven't told you everything yet." Hearing this, the demons were immediately shocked. Paimon continued, "You must all know about the current plague. The plague appeared suddenly one day and spread rapidly across the entire continent. The death toll is enormous and continues to grow. In fact, this plague was deliberately spread, and the culprit who spread it is him, the 71st-ranked demon lord, Dantalian." Dantalian interestingly stroked his chin. He had already guessed this was their real plan, and Andrielphus was just the fuse, so they were starting their real plan now. Then Marbus indicated she must have solid evidence to support this. Seeing Paimon regain her composure, Ivar's anxious heart also settled down. After that, Paimon explained the cause and effect. This plague had taken many lives, including humans and demons. But the good news was that this plague was curable. An herb called black grass was precisely its antidote. But who would be the first to think of this black herb for treating the plague? As far as I know, that person was precisely Dantalian. Even stranger, before the plague outbreak, he had bought up all the black herb available. The demon lords wondered how he knew in advance. He not only knew when the plague would arrive, but also knew how to treat it. So the only explanation was that he deliberately spread this plague. And before this, Dantalian had a full-time consultant in Kunkusuka. This consultant personally said he bought all the black grass. Paimon could guarantee she hadn't omitted anything. She said, "So, Dantalian, how did you obtain this information?" Marbus looked at Dantalian beside him, then asked Ivar behind him. If what Paimon just said was true, Ivar said, "I dare not say what is truth and what is lie. I'm not sure if I should make such a decision before His Highness. However, if His Highness orders me to do so, I can provide the necessary evidence." Marbus said, "So you can provide evidence right now?" Ivar affirmed this. When Ivar looked at Dantalian beside him, he found him wearing a very strange expression, but regardless, he believed that this time, Dantalian absolutely couldn't escape. But just then, a panicked voice interrupted everyone in the venue. Please forgive the interruption on the Sacred Walpurgis night. It turned out they had received news that the headquarters of the Kunkusuka Merchant Guild was attacked. This immediately panicked Ivar. He urgently asked, what's the situation now? The subordinate said, according to their judgment, an explosion should have occurred at the highest point of the headquarters, and that was precisely where Ivar kept his collection. Ivar directly fell to his knees, hoping Marbas would give him some time. Walpurgis was one of the important gatherings of demon lords, so Marbas could only give him 15 minutes. Having received permission, Ivar hurried toward the Merchant Guild. Seeing this scene, Barbatos mockingly laughed at Paimon. Look at how ridiculous the person you trust looks in his panic. Meanwhile, Dantalian also walked toward the door, but was stopped by Paimon. Dantalian secretly smiled to himself and said, be patient, Paimon. You'll have your chance. I won't run away. I'm just going out for some air, so please don't worry. As he left, he bumped into a yellow-haired demon lord. Just like that, Paimon could only angrily watch Dantalian leave the venue. Outside the venue, Tokal had been waiting for some time. Then Ivar asked what exactly was going on. However, Tokal didn't know either. Because time was tight, Ivar had him dispatch soldiers and servants to the headquarters. He himself went up to the rooftop of the venue to check on the Merchant Guild situation. Damn it, who would do such a thing? That was the most vulnerable place. Ivar was very worried his collection would be damaged, so he decided that after the meeting ended tonight, he would change back to his youngest body. When he arrived at the rooftop, a familiar voice directly interrupted him. You finally came. This is the best place to see your room clearly, so I guessed you would definitely come here. Looking at the smiling Dantalian, Ivar was puzzled about why he was here. Just a few minutes ago, the Bebel sisters had arrived above the Kunkusuka Merchant Guild. They were waiting here for a signal, because this was Dantalian's request. Last night, Dantalian had made a request to them, to attack the Kunkusuka Merchant Guild. Hearing the news, the Bebel sisters were shocked. However, Dantalian told them this matter was related to them, because the departed witch Beatrice had become prey for vampires. To uncover the truth, they followed Dantalian's request. Whether it was true or not, as long as they broke through Ivar's room, everything would come to light. Soon they received the signal from Dantalian. Although they weren't as powerful as demon lords, Witch's strength wasn't weak either. Time returned to the present. Seeing Dantalian on the rooftop, Ivar was puzzled. Could it be that they did this? If that was really the case, then Barbatos was very likely hiding in the dark. Ivar looked around. Seeing this, Dantalian said, no need to be nervous. There are only the two of us on this rooftop. I hope to have a heart-to-heart conversation. Ivar wasn't clear about Dantalian's purpose. What did he want to do? He said, Your Highness Dantalian, I truly can't believe you're the one who attacked my merchant guild. Dantalian said, You're right. This was indeed my doing. Ivar had only guessed, but didn't expect it was really him. Dantalian said, But don't worry. I did all this just to talk with you. I didn't plan to destroy the merchant guild. If I didn't do so much, I thought we wouldn't have a chance to meet alone. So for causing your merchant guild a little loss, I truly apologize. At this moment, Ivar was extremely angry. He thought, this filthy rat, I must tear you to pieces. He said, Your Highness, we have nothing to talk about. I'm just submitting information as required by Marbas. I regret that we're ending our first conversation like this, especially since this is our first meeting. Dantalian said, This is a very regrettable matter. Lord Ivar, you must be able to understand how I'm feeling right now. Ivar didn't understand what Dantalian was saying, but he still politely said, An old man like me dares not imagine what His Highness the Demon Lord is thinking. Dantalian let out a cold laugh and said, I understand. An old man. Then, Lord Ivar, are you willing to become my subordinate? Hearing this, Ivar's brows furrowed tightly. What was he saying? Even if he was a demon lord, he was someone who couldn't be counted on. Then Ivar awkwardly asked, You must be joking. However, Dantalian was very serious. I'm serious. I'll repeat it. Ivar, are you willing to become my subordinate? Ivar couldn't hold back anymore and burst out laughing. Then Dantalian also laughed loudly. Ivar said, Is it you who's gone mad or me, Mr. Dantalian? To have me pledge loyalty to you is simply wishful thinking. Dantalian said, So you've finally revealed your true feelings, Lord Ivar. Then let's resolve this issue right now. Then Dantalian signaled for Lapis to come out. Seeing Lapis, Ivar was very angry. He said, You damned bastard, you surely haven't forgotten the rules of the Merchant Guild. In the great Kunkusuka Merchant Guild, traders pay blood for blood. You will definitely regret this. Lapis said, If it's for a goal, any necessary means can be used. This is what you taught me. Dantalian can give me the best resources and the confidence I need. This is why I don't regret it. After that, Dantalian didn't forget to mock. It's just that simple. Ivar gripped his cane tightly. He said, Your so-called beautiful scene is nothing but a joke. After this, you will lose everything. I only need to provide evidence about the black grass. However, Dantalian didn't feel the slightest panic. His smile sent chills through Ivar's heart. He said, Why are you still laughing? Have you really gone mad? Dantalian gazed at Ivar and said, No, I'm just very worried. Meanwhile, Dantalian reached into his pocket, then pulled out a strand of golden hair and said, Do you know what this is? Seeing the strand of hair, Ivar was shocked. But Lapis was puzzled. She didn't understand what was so surprising about a strand of hair. Dantalian suppressed his laughter. He said, I'm not worried about your old body. What I'm really worried about is, she's located in the distant cold land of the north, in the depths of a cave, a girl beneath the icy snow ravaged by storms. That's what I'm worried about. Lapis couldn't understand Dantalion's words at all. However, Ivar couldn't sit still anymore, because this was his greatest secret. He had never told anyone about his true body. For Dantalion, who had cleared the dungeon defense, it was impossible for him not to know Ivar's true identity, because in the game, Ivar was a vampire heroine. Ivar was betrayed by the demon lord she served. She sealed herself in an ice coffin so she would never be used again. She parasitized her consciousness in dolls from her collection to live. Dantalion was surprised the first time he saw Ivar, because he hadn't expected Ivar to appear as an old man. Dantalion said, "What if a young girl's body were displayed on a platform, with a pack of beasts staring at her? Or if I gave a small signal and disaster befell that girl?" Ivar's body trembled violently. Although he knew the hair in Dantalion's hand might be fake, he didn't dare gamble since even his body's hiding place had been discovered. And this strand of hair was precisely borrowed by Dantalion from a demon lord when he came out. He hadn't expected the effect to be surprisingly good. Looking at Ivar's reaction, all that was needed now was the final strike. Although Lapis couldn't understand Dantalion's words, judging by Ivar's reaction, what Dantalion said must all be true. Then Dantalion spoke again. "Ivar, now I'm giving you one last chance. Are you willing to pledge loyalty to me?" At this moment, Ivar was at a loss, thinking, why is this happening to me? Damn it, I hate this. Ivar's heart was pounding. Then a powerful energy burst forth from his body. It seemed he planned to fight Dantalion to the death. This sudden situation was beyond Dantalion's expectations, but their bodies suffered no harm. When Dantalion opened his eyes again, Lapis had already been controlled by Ivar. Ivar said, "If you move even a little bit, then I'll kill her immediately." Dantalion frowned. He said, "Ivar, what do you mean by this?" Ivar indicated that Dantalion should release his true body, or else he would kill Lapis. Based on what Ivar had seen before, he believed Lapis was absolutely his most beloved woman, and this would become his weakness. After all, for Lapis's sake, he had personally killed a demon lord, so he felt Dantalion had no choice but to make a deal with him. Although Ivar really wanted to kill Dantalion, he still couldn't do that. The most important thing was to secure his true body's safety. After all, the magic he had just used had exhausted all his mana. Once he retrieved his true body, he would personally kill Dantalion. However, at this moment, Dantalion only fell into silence. Then Dantalion said, "If you want to kill her, then kill her." Ivar couldn't believe his ears. Dantalion continued, "Didn't you hear? I don't care if you kill Lapis. You made Lapis a transaction from the start, an equal transaction between two parties. However, when one party is too powerful, the transaction will be broken. For someone called the leader of Kunkasuka, I thought you would understand such a simple matter." Then Dantalion revealed a smile and spoke words like knife points. "You don't mind, do you, Lapis?" Lapis frowned as she looked at Dantalion. Then she said without hesitation, "I don't mind. For your highness, I am willing to dedicate my life." Hearing the conversation between the two, Ivar was bewildered. Meanwhile, Dantalion called out to Ivar again. He said, "Regarding the plague, you were wrong from the very beginning. You thought Barbatos was the mastermind, Lapis was the executor, and I was just a puppet." Ivar never expected that all his thoughts had already been seen through. Then Dantalion said, "This entire plan was actually orchestrated by me alone. You lost your judgment over a petty desire for revenge. You disappoint me, Ivar." The successive blows left Ivar unable to stand his ground any longer. He also realized that the two of them weren't even on the same level. He was no match for Dantalion. At this moment, Dantalion was like a true demon. Then Dantalion said, "Working under me doesn't require you to change anything. You'll still be the helmsman of the Kunkasuka Merchant Guild. What I want is just your occasional cooperation. Of course, you also have the right to refuse, but can you afford the consequences?" Then Dantalion made his first request. That was to cooperate with his upcoming performance. Ivar had no choice but to agree. As he was leaving, Dantalion told Ivar that the plague wasn't actually spread by him. He just happened to exploit it. A moment later, Marbas looked at the pocket watch in his hand. The appointed time had arrived. Soon, Ivar appeared once again in everyone's sight. However, the demon lords also noticed something was wrong with him. He looked in very poor condition. Barbatos mocked, "Your merchant guild was destroyed. Did it take away your courage from earlier too?" Marbas signaled her to be quiet. Barbatos stuck out her tongue and said, Okay. Then Dantalion, who had gone out for fresh air, also walked in. Paimon thought he had already fled. She didn't expect him to dare come back. Marbas said, "Since everyone's here, let's continue our previous meeting." So Paimon immediately called out to Ivar. She said, "Now present all the evidence." Hearing Paimon's demand, Ivar remained unmoved. Paimon was confused, then urged him again to hurry up. But Ivar said, "I'm sorry, Lord Paimon, there's no evidence showing it was Dantalion's doing." Paimon said in shock, "Ivar, what are you saying?" Ivar knew this would definitely offend Paimon, but he had no choice but to do this. So he continued, "There's no evidence whatsoever." Lord Paimon's statement was a lie. Instantly, the entire ballroom was shrouded in a strange silence. The sudden reversal surprised even Marbas and Barbatos. Only Dantalion showed a victor's smile. Upon hearing this, Paimon burst out with powerful magic. Her originally beautiful face became twisted. This scene shocked everyone once again. However, Marbas merely released his aura and suppressed Paimon. Marbas said, This is the sacred Walpurgis night. Stop your aggressive behavior immediately. Paimon clenched her teeth tightly, as she was in great pain at this moment. A moment later, Paimon spoke again, saying she would summon the Merchant Guild's advisor, Tokul. Soon a voice attracted everyone's attention, because Tokul had been waiting for quite some time. Dantalion felt no fear. In this situation, his influence was minimal. Paimon's fate was already sealed. Tokul looked at his master, having stayed by Ivar's side for many years. This was the first time he'd seen Ivar like this. Although Ivar hadn't said anything to Tokul, he knew what to do next. Paimon said, Tokul once told me that the Black Death was spread by Dantalion through some means. Is what I said true? Tokul confirmed Paimon's statement straightforwardly. What you said is correct. I can state with certainty here that Dantalion is the culprit who caused the Black Death. However, that was a complete and utter lie. It was slander without any evidence. Paimon's expression became rigid again as she said, Did Ivar make you say this? Tokul said, No, I didn't receive orders from anyone, because all of this was orchestrated by me alone. Paimon was very angry and wanted Tokul to tell her the truth because she knew Tokul wouldn't do such a thing. After all, they had known each other for hundreds of years. She said, I'm asking you as an old friend, who is the person behind you? Even so, Tokul insisted it was his own plan. He said, I wanted to obtain the black grass, but all the herbs were in Dantalion's hands. I couldn't do it alone, so I wanted to use you two. Paimon didn't understand what nonsense Tokul was spouting. After all, she knew about this matter from beginning to end. Tokul said, I exploited your kindness and Ivar's power. Meanwhile, Dantalion saw through what Tokul was trying to do at a glance. Hearing Tokul's words, Marbas flew into a rage, using a demon lord to satisfy one's own selfish desires. This crime was enough to have him cut into 1,000 pieces. Tokul didn't defend his crimes. Instead, he said, Since all my plans have failed, then it's all over. If there's any fault on Paimon's part, it's that she trusted me. Tokul pulled out a dagger from his chest. This was the last thing he could do for Ivar and Paimon. Only if he died could this hearing come to an end. With a bang, the goblin's small body fell to the floor. This goblin was a merchant Paimon could trust 100%. He died right before Paimon's eyes like this. Paimon's screams echoed throughout the entire venue. Marbas knew Paimon wasn't in good condition, so he told her to go rest. Only Barbados laughed out loud in the venue. This was the first time she'd seen Paimon so helpless. She said, Nothing is more entertaining than this. At the same time, Dantalion knelt on one knee before Tokul. He hadn't expected him to actually do it, exchanging his death for Paimon and Ivar's innocence, turning them from masterminds into victims. He genuinely admired him. At this moment, Marbas said, Paimon will pay the price for everything that happened. Dantalion said, Mr. Marbas, I think that's unnecessary. Dantalion's response shocked them once again. Dantalion continued, Paimon was just being used. Now Tokul is dead too, so there's no one who can be held responsible. And Marbas's favorability toward Dantalion increased. He respected Dantalion's choice, so the hearing ended here, and next would be the real Walpurgis night. Barbatos expressed that she must drink to her heart's content. She playfully extended an invitation to Dantalion. Barbatos' smile looked quite troublesome. The ballroom immediately transformed into a banquet hall. Ivar carried Tokul's body and left dejectedly. He had lost his most trusted assistant and friend. One day, he would avenge Tokul. At this moment, Dantalion finally squeezed out some free time, because he had been constantly force-fed drinks by Barbados. Such a small person, he didn't expect her to drink so much. He still hadn't recovered. He had accidentally entered the world of dungeon defense. So far, many things had happened. Although each contest meant life or death, he enjoyed such times. Meanwhile, Lapis also came to the terrace outside. She had guessed Dantalion would be outside. At this moment, she was puzzled why Dantalion wanted to forgive Paimon. He could have easily defeated her, because Paimon was a very troublesome opponent. Dantalion sighed helplessly and said, I have my reasons. I'm very tired today. Let me rest. Lapis's azure blue eyes stared at him intently. Dantalion was helpless about this. Paimon meant nothing to him, because his vision was greater than anyone else's in this world. He was planning a grand scheme, and he had promised to give Lapis a good future. Perhaps others would think Dantalion was a madman, but Lapis believed in him. The seemingly casual words revealed his enormous ambition. He made no further explanations. That was just the kind of person he was. Before Dantalion could react, Lapis bit his lips directly. The sudden action left him no time to respond. Dantalion said in panic, That was my first kiss. Lapis said she was starting to fall for him. Hearing this, Dantalion froze and said, Making you my fiancé was part of my plan. I even let you die, just like in the situation earlier, all for my own plan. Lapis actually understood this clearly. She believed in Dantalion, believed he could definitely do it. This was the first time Dantalion had seen Lapis smile. Then he pulled Lapis into his embrace and kissed her again. After being in love with a succubus for 2.5 days, he was greeted with a merciless punch. This scene left the people in the plaza completely stunned. After all, their forbidden love was known to everyone. What could be the reason that two people so in love would break up in the street? 2.5 hours later, news of the demon lord and succubus's breakup had spread everywhere. However, Dantalion had no time to worry about that at the moment. Barbados came to his dungeon and said, I heard you and your little lover had a big fight. Barbados was very interested in this matter. Hearing this, Dantalian sighed. He didn't expect that in just 2.5 hours, the news had spread so far. More than that, he was more concerned about why Barbados came here. Barbados laughed gleefully. Normally, touching a demon lord could result in a death sentence. I'm curious what you did to Lapis. However, Dantalian said angrily, please don't interfere with other people's love lives. Barbados said, don't talk like that. You know I'm very interested in you. As a demon lord of higher rank than you, I have a responsibility to look after my junior. Dantalian understood what she meant. After all, the Demon Lord faction was divided into many factions. Barbados continued, don't take it so seriously. There are many women out there. Everyone will soon forget about your date with that bitch. I'm someone who's lived for over 500 years, so I understand love better than anyone. If you do as I say, even high elves will drain you dry without you saying a word. So, tell me, what exactly happened? Dantalian looked very sad. Then he slowly said, half a month ago, an old woman came to visit me. She claimed to be Lapis's mother. I said, I heard Lapis became an orphan at birth. Why did you abandon Lapis? The old woman cried and said, I was driven out by the villagers right after giving birth to Lapis. Since that day I haven't stopped thinking about her for a single day. I listened silently to this old woman's life story. When she heard I agreed to let her see Lapis, the old woman began to laugh. Just then, Lapis happened to bring me a letter, and I happened to have her confirm whether this person was her mother. Seeing Lapis, the woman walked forward directly. She said, my child, this is my child. However, Lapis's expression was very strange. She seemed unwilling to see this person, and she also seemed somewhat angry. I saw all of this. I realized this old woman was deceiving me. So I asked again, are you Lapis's mother? If you dare lie to me, I can kill you right now. The old woman immediately confirmed it upon hearing this. Then I asked why she decided to find her only now. The old woman stammered, Lapis is my child, so there may be some misunderstandings. From now on, I want to live well with Lapis. We shouldn't dwell on the past, but look forward. The old woman's words made me very angry, so my fist landed directly on her face, because I could see she wanted to come and burden Lapis. In the past, she didn't care about Lapis at all. Now that she heard her life had improved, she couldn't wait to come and enjoy the good life. Lapis is my beloved. I won't let anyone hurt her anymore. When Lapis saw me reach for the sword beside me, she signaled me to stop. But thinking of how Lapis looked earlier, my anger had already clouded my judgment, because I recalled my own damned scoundrel of a father. As I prepared to swing the sword, Lapis blocked directly in front of me. The old woman was already scared senseless. She hurriedly ran toward the door, so I questioned why Lapis stopped me. It was that person who ruined her carefree life. Lapis just said with a gloomy face, there's no need to dirty your hands over such a thing, so I indicated I could go find some mercenaries. Lapis was saddened by these words and said, you know nothing about me. Then she left. But I don't know what I did wrong. Barbatos looked at Dantalian with a strange expression and said, are you crazy? You don't know what you did? Dantalian said, I'm being reasonable. The person who ruined her life was right in front of me. Barbatos was speechless and said, I hoped you were a capable newcomer, but it turns out you're a complete madman. Dantalian was confused. Barbatos continued, you wanted to kill her biological mother right in front of Lapis. However, Dantalian said, it's no big deal. If a prostitute deserves to die, then she should be executed. Barbatos sighed. How does she even deal with you? If I were her, I would have cut off your genitals long ago. Hearing this, Dantalian froze and said, whose side are you on? Barbatos had an expression, as if some knot in her heart had been untied. Just as Dantalian wanted to continue speaking, his gaze accidentally fell on Barbatos's thighs. Barbatos said with disgust, where are you looking? Dantalian replied, I'm admiring you. Barbatos swirled her wineglass. She said, it's not free. Pay if you want to look. Dantalian then said, Lapis also received a letter before she left. Barbatos tilted her head and asked, what letter? Dantalian pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to Barbatos. It read, within 10 days, 2,000 soldiers will attack your castle. Barbatos tasted the wine with her tongue and said, this is a threatening letter, right? However, Dantalian said, no. Rather than a threat, it's more like a warning. Barbatos was puzzled why he thought so. Then Dantalian showed her the letter. Although there were only 2 sentences, they hid many implications. Barbatos frowned. She didn't see anything. So Dantalian listed the suspicious points for her. First was the first sentence, you're being targeted. This could also be interpreted as, I'm not your enemy. If it were a threat, this would be too mild. However, Dantalian was still puzzled about who sent the letter and what their intention was. Hearing his reasoning, Barbatos laughed loudly. This is truly interesting. Dantalian also deduced that the letter writer was an educated person from high society. The handwriting was slightly slanted, suggesting this person was left-handed or ambidextrous. Barbatos didn't expect Dantalian to analyze to this extent from just one letter. A person's writing reflected their life, so this person was likely in a high position. Then Barbatos had Dantalian show her the letter. To Barbatos, this looked no different from ordinary handwriting. She was puzzled how Dantalian could tell it was from someone in high society. Dantalian sighed helplessly, then had Barbatos look at the comma in the middle of the numbers. He said, this is why I said the person who wrote this letter came from high society. Barbatos still looked confused. Dantalian said, after all, most people are too lazy to write commas, so people with this habit should be merchants who frequently handle large sums of money, or people who often deal with merchants. It could also be their attendants. Barbatos pinched her chin and said, interesting. However, Dantalion's words made her freeze again. I saw 5 things in the letter, so wouldn't it be more interesting if I explained them one by one? Barbados couldn't help but praise his analytical ability. She said, since you say it's a merchant, then let's verify the answer. I can find the person who wrote the letter. This puzzled Dantalion. Barbados gently bit her finger. Then a surge of magic burst from within her body. Then she began inscribing something on the letter. As energy was infused, Barbados's demon tracking magic was complete. Soon the letter transformed into a bat. Barbados caught it. She said, this thing will now fly to the person who wrote the letter. Then I'll naturally know who the writer is. Watching the departing bat, Dantalion was curious how long it would take. He said, if it's our great Barbados, surely it was found quickly, right? Barbados said, my bat is absolute. Let's see if your reasoning is correct. You said they were merchants, right? Dantalion smiled and said, what I said was just speculation. However, I speculate that I have a very good relationship with this merchant. However, Barbados indicated she could help him capture this person. Dantalion wagged his index finger and said, no, I speculate that I have a very good relationship with this merchant. The scene shifted to the Kunkusuka Merchant Guild. Ivar stated he had never written such a letter. Dantalion said, in the past, you secretly attacked me. In other words, you're still completely untrustworthy. Ivar hurriedly said, I'm sorry, I no longer intend to harbor hostility toward you. However, even so, Dantalion still couldn't trust him. Ivar, sweating profusely, immediately asked what he needed to do to be trusted. Dantalion smiled and said, it's simple, although I don't know if it's true or false. I want you to help me prepare an army of 3,000 men. This should be very easy for your Kunkusuka Merchant Guild, Ivar said. You mean you want me to gather 3,000 people in just 2 days? Hearing Ivar's words, Dantalion frowned and said, are you saying you can't do it? Ivar quickly explained, I believe gathering an army within 2 days is possible, especially if you want a high-quality army. It would take at least half a month. Hearing this, Dantalion just smiled. He said, there are many mercenaries nearby. I'm talking about the 4,000 soldiers of Niflheim. You're the de facto leader of this city. Can't you borrow them for a while? Ivar was startled, because they were a defense line for Niflheim. It was a free city supporting the demon world's economy. These soldiers were the guarantee maintaining its operation. If enemies came to launch a raid, it would have a negative impact on the entire demon world. However, Dantalion didn't care about these things. After all, this wasn't his concern. Then he came before Ivar. He took out that lock of golden hair and said, Ivar, I think you may have forgotten. Your true body is in my hands. Ivar showed a pained expression. He said, why? I helped you resist Lord Payman back then. Didn't I protect you? I even sacrificed my most capable assistant. Dantalion laughed loudly. I think you may have misunderstood. You think that proves your loyalty? Ivar's eyes trembled uneasily. Dantalion continued, we made no promises. Promises are mutually beneficial things. Dantalion used the gentlest tone to signal Ivar to kneel. Ivar's heart pounded. Then he slowly bent his knees. His body trembled constantly. Dantalion nodded with satisfaction. He said, good. Now put your hands on the ground. Lower your head. Ivar's face was filled with humiliation and anger, but he had to do it. Then Dantalion stepped on his head. He said, our relationship is simpler than this. What I need is absolute obedience. Dantalion was like training a dog, rubbing Ivar's dignity hard into the ground until all his fighting spirit was worn away. Because once a person kneels for long enough, they'll find it very difficult to raise that proud head again. Dantalion said, next, prepare 3,000 soldiers for me. Can you complete this? Ivar said nothing more, only obedience. Dantalion showed a demon-like smile and said, good. Next, I have one more thing I need to tell you. I want you to investigate someone. After that, having heard Dantalion's description, Barbados said, I must praise you for being a sadist. I can already imagine that old man's sour face. However, I'm still very curious about the letter writer. Dantalion said, no need to rush. Before we're attacked, there isn't much time left. I think, rather than that, you're probably wondering what happened with Lapis. Barbados showed an intrigued expression. She had guessed that the fight between Dantalion and Lapis might be fake, and things were just as she thought. The time went back to September 7th. Dantalion was awakened by the sound of paper rustling. He rubbed his eyes and saw Lapis sitting at the bedside. Dantalion asked curiously if it was a letter from Ivar. Lapis said yes. He investigated 13 slave markets and learned there were 4 markets dealing with noble slaves. The slave you're looking for is registered under Pavia's name. Dantalion nodded with satisfaction. Laura Farnese, from the day she was born as an illegitimate daughter in the Duke of Farnese's household, she had been confined in the mansion. Not a single person treated her as a family member. Her existence had always been unknown. For years, she was imprisoned underground. It seems Miss Laura spent a very tragic childhood. Lapis was puzzled why Dantalion would be interested in a human girl. Dantalion looked at Lapis playfully and said, what's wrong? Are you jealous? Lapis's brows furrowed slightly as she said, I never thought you'd like such young girls. Hearing this, Dantalion quickly said, please stop that line of thinking. I'm not interested in childlike body types. Lapis stared at him intently. Dantalion sighed helplessly. He said, I'm interested in her because we need her now. This child harbors the greatest hatred toward humans. she's the person who hates humans most in the world. Lapis was puzzled how Dantalion could tell. Dantalion said, think from Laura's perspective. Her family turned a blind eye to her. When she was imprisoned for years, she was repeatedly abused and despised. Now the Farnese family has gone bankrupt, so naturally she's reduced to a slave sold in the market. So what do you think she's thinking now? What is she yearning for? If you imagine it, you'll understand. There's only one answer: revenge. So she's the person I want most right now. Dantalion knew that, like the protagonist, she was an influential figure in that era. But the difference between them was she didn't bring hope to this world. Instead, she pushed the world into the abyss of fear. More humans died by her hand than by demon lords. Right now, she was a vulnerable young girl, so Dantalion wanted to seize this girl destined to become a general. Lapis thought he wanted a slave from high nobility. Dantalion quickly interrupted. What kind of person do you think I am? Lapis said, actually, I'm looking forward to it. After all, one more person will lighten my burden. Dantalion helplessly covered his face and said, weren't you the one who came to me first? Lapis lowered her head because she didn't expect Dantalion to be this capable. She said, I regret it a bit now. This is seriously affecting my daily work. Dantalion didn't expect to hear complaints from his lover after just 1 week. Just then, knocking at the door interrupted them both. It turned out it was already lunchtime. Just as Lapis said, if Dantalion continued like this every day, it would seriously affect her work time. Soon the maids came in carrying food. What the maids didn't expect was that they hadn't dressed yet. They quickly apologized. Dantalion signaled them not to mind. He was the one who allowed them to enter. With permission, the maids set out food for Dantalion. Although they tried to ignore them both, they ultimately couldn't help stealing glances. This was their first time seeing an undressed demon lord. But just then, Dantalion heard a maid click her tongue, although the sound was very low enough that he could completely ignore it. His mood was very unpleasant. Just as the maids were preparing to leave, Dantalion called out to them directly. He said, all of you stay where you are and don't move. The maids were puzzled. Does your highness need anything else? Dantalion asked. Which of you just clicked your tongue? The maids immediately broke out in cold sweat. Dantalion got up directly. He said, so you're going to deny it? But I heard it very clearly. One of you clicked your tongue. The maids panicked. Then their eyes gathered on one person, a Beast Tribe girl with cat ears. The Beast Tribe maid realized her mistake and began to panic. Her colleagues stepped back a few steps. They seemed to predict what her fate would be. Seeing Dantalion's terrifying expression, the maid quickly apologized. Dantalion asked why she clicked her tongue, but the maid couldn't answer. However, Dantalion already knew the answer now. This maid wasn't clicking her tongue at him. In other words, she was clicking her tongue at Lapis beside him, Dantalion said. Seeing a lowly mixed-blood succubus lying in the same bed as a demon lord made you very jealous. That's why you clicked your tongue at my beloved. Am I right? The reason Dantalion was so angry was because of his own experience. His father was a lustful person. A woman easily lured him away. This led to the tragedy of Dantalion's mother. It was because there were only such irresponsible people in the world that he and his siblings were like strangers. The maid quickly begged for mercy, Your Highness. Please spare my life. Just then, Lapis called out to me. Lapis's tone was unusually cold, Lord Dantalion. Lapis looked at him like that, as if questioning, haven't you realized what you did wrong yet? Dantalion also realized he had become emotional again. This was different from the previous situation. He realized how crazy his action just now was, wanting to execute a young girl just because she clicked her tongue. Dantalion forcibly calmed himself down. Then he said, so, you realize your mistake now? The maid quickly said, yes, Your Highness, I'm truly very sorry. I won't do it again. Dantalion said, you can get lost now. So the maids quickly left the room. When Dantalion turned to meet Lapis's gaze, he said, I'm sorry. I find it hard to stay calm when it concerns you, but this time I maintained my composure. Lapis's cold eyes gazed at Dantalion. At the same time, a dialogue box indicated that Lapis's favorability decreased by 7 points. Remaining favorability 11. She said, I've arranged the trip to the slave market so you can set out after lunch. Lapis then turned and left. Dantalion didn't know why Lapis wouldn't forgive him. Did he really have a problem? After they were both ready, he found the Bebel sisters, because he still needed their help. After all, a demon lord appearing openly in a human city was a very dangerous thing, so he had to disguise himself. After Humbaba released a spell, a powerful energy covered Dantalion. When he appeared again, he looked completely like a human. Dantalion touched the horns on his forehead and found they had truly disappeared. He was satisfied. Receiving the demon lord's praise, Humbaba was also very happy. Just as Dantalion thought he could freely enter and exit the town, the witch told him the magic had one fatal flaw. That was when the midnight bell tolled, the disguise magic would lose effect, so he needed to finish what he wanted to do before the disguise ended. Dantalion nodded. 12 hours was enough for him. Then he said, I need you to hide and await my orders. Humbaba made an acknowledgement gesture. When Dantalion looked at Lapis, she still didn't acknowledge him. Dantalion said, look at my outfit. What do you think? Have you fallen in love with me again? However, Lapis just turned around, she said before entering the human town. I hope you keep your identity strictly confidential. Dantalion was stunned. Then he could only helplessly move forward. Since the maid incident last time, Lapis seemed to ignore him completely. After the favorability decreased, things between them had been awkward, and causing all this was a flaw in his character. because some things couldn't be described as right or wrong. Humbaba looked at them both puzzledly. She thought, is this the legendary false love? Due to legal recognition by the nation, this was one of the largest slave markets. When Dantalion arrived here, he saw many people wearing shackles. He tossed a few gold coins to a goblin. In an unfamiliar place, this was the fastest way to obtain information. The goblin enthusiastically asked, what kind of slave do you want? Pavia has approximately 4,000 slaves. This city may not be very large, but the quality is first-rate, and there are all kinds of races. You can even find rare goods you can't see elsewhere. Dantalion nodded with satisfaction. It sounded exciting. Then he changed the subject. I heard there's a human here, a fallen human noble who will be sold in the market. Hearing this, the goblin smiled meaningfully and said, you're absolutely right. She's definitely the highlight of the auction. Like the rare goods mentioned earlier, she'll be auctioned tomorrow. Dantalion smiled and said, it seems you're quite knowledgeable. The goblin also laughed cheerfully and said, your praise honors me, but I'm afraid you won't find that young lady this time. Dantalion was puzzled. Then the goblin had him look at the two people behind him. The man on the left wearing an eye patch was the head of the Pavia slave traders. The man on the right wearing a mask was Count Rossel, who intended to buy the young lady. After hearing the goblin's explanation, Dantalion understood the implications. It seemed the buyer had already been decided from the beginning. It appeared this matter was not simple. Dantalion then asked how he could build a good relationship with the slave traders. The goblin said, this is simply impossible. The merchants of Pavia share deep trust with one another. So Dantalion pulled out another bag of gold coins. Seeing this, the goblin burst into laughter and immediately thought of a solution for Dantalion. He said, there's a banquet for slave traders tonight at a tavern on the outskirts of the city. The slave traders most likely run a gambling den there. Perhaps you could try your luck. There's one more important thing. That is the name of the slave trader in charge of the main activities. His name is Giacomo. Soon Dantalion arrived at the tavern. When he entered, everyone inside stared at him. He walked to the counter and ordered a drink. At the same time, he scanned the room for Giacomo. Soon he heard the name called from the gambling table. It was a young man with blonde hair. Finally found you. At this moment, there was about an hour and a half left before the bell would ring. Dantalion just needed an opportunity to make contact with Giacomo. Tonight, Giacomo had lost many times in a row. Watching his distressed expression, the bearded man beside him consoled him, saying his luck would surely turn next time. The agitated Giacomo continued to bet. Unexpectedly, he lost again. Meanwhile, the bearded man raked in his winnings. Giacomo couldn't believe his bad luck, but he refused to give up. The man said, don't be too depressed. After all, you have that Farnese girl. Tomorrow you'll make a lot of money. The others around him kept enticing him, saying, a noblewoman's daughter would surely fetch a good price. They made a big deal about Farnese's illegitimate daughter, while everyone laughed heartily. Only Giacomo remained expressionless, because he had different feelings for Laura. As they chatted, they continued the card game. However, the bearded man had started cheating. He had probably been cheating all along. He hid cards in his sleeve, then pretended to draw a card, but just then a figure appeared behind him. Before he could react, a dagger was plunged into the back of his hand. Dantalion had pierced right through his hand. The bearded man's screams echoed throughout the tavern. Dantalion smiled and lifted up his palm, then acted surprised. He said, you weren't cheating, were you? Giacomo was confused by this. When Dantalion raised the man's hand up, Giacomo suddenly understood. The reason why Dantalion waited until now to expose him and let Giacomo lose money deliberately is to gain Giacomo favor. It seems you were all completely fooled by this guy. After striking up a conversation with Giacomo, Dantalion said, are you still hesitating about whether to sell Laura to Count Rossel? This puzzled Giacomo, because Laura's name had not been made public. Dantalion said, don't be nervous. I want to free that girl from slavery. In fact, that's what you want too, isn't it? Giacomo hadn't expected his thoughts to be seen through, but he had no way to save Laura. The bearded man cursed angrily. Do you know the consequences of violating merchant rules? However, Dantalion ignored him. He said, Giacomo, it's time for you to make a choice. You need to be brave now. You can do it. Giacomo was stunned by the praise, thinking, can I really do it? After a moment of thought, Giacomo made his decision. He said, I brought that girl here so I'll decide her fate. Just like that, Dantalion successfully gained Giacomo's trust. On his way out, he ordered 2 bottles of wine. To celebrate Giacomo's decision, he planned to treat him to a drink. Dantalion said, let's drink to our meeting, because you and I are the same kind of people. Dantalion said, my ideal is to free all slaves from the market. To achieve this, I need to find someone with a kind heart like yours. I'm not here looking for Laura. I'm looking for you. After hearing what Dantalion said, Giacomo's favorability for him skyrocketed. Giacomo had never wanted to be in the slave trade. It was all because of family circumstances. Giacomo hoped Dantalion would definitely rescue her. Dantalion pretended not to know and asked, why would you go to such lengths for Laura? However, just as Giacomo was about to speak, his consciousness began to blur. His body started swaying from side to side. Only Dantalion knew the drug was taking effect. Dantalion said, I understand your feelings. I believe you're the only one who can truly take care of her. Dantalian knew he had feelings for Laura, so he kept drawing information out of Giacomo. Soon Giacomo told Dantalian Laura's exact location. When Giacomo looked up again, he found the whole world was distorting. Dantalian thought, I didn't expect this guy's favorability to rise so easily. Dantalian propped him against the wall. It seemed Giacomo was still too naive. Hopefully after meeting a bad person like me, he'll learn his lesson. Then Dantalian pulled out his pocket watch. The time was exactly 12 o'clock at night. His disguise magic ended at this moment. At that moment, Laura was still reading by moonlight, but the light was soon blocked by a figure. Dantalian said, Poor maiden, do you want to seize your future? Laura looked at Dantalian with eyes devoid of any light. Then she spoke in a hoarse voice. You're blocking the moonlight. Without light, I can't read. In the game, Laura was one of the protagonists. She was a person who changed the world. But there was one difference. The protagonist saved the world, while Laura destroyed the world. In Dungeon Defense, the player belonged to the Habsburg Empire. Laura belonged to the Kingdom of Brittany. To fight for dominion, the two nations waged a fierce war that lasted many years. The number of human deaths was enormous. However, the damage Laura caused exceeded even that of the Demon Lord. For players, she was more threatening than the Demon Lord. But these events occurred 15 to 20 years later, because the current Laura was just a 16-year-old girl. That's why Dantalian wanted to take her. Dantalian said, I have a lot of money, so I can easily buy you. And the witch I hired is waiting near the market, but I want to consider your feelings. Dantalian then stepped aside. The bright moonlight once again fell on the worn book. Laura nodded and said, Thank you, you are a gentleman. Dantalian said, Even if you become my subordinate, I will still respect you. Laura raised her head again and asked, Not a tool of desire, but a servant? Dantalian said, Yes, if I wanted a sex slave, I would have used money or violence long ago, but I'm not that kind of person. I want to prove to you that I'm worthy of being your master. Laura's voice was cold. Demon Lord, thank you. But my fate is only one. That is to possibly become a tool for rich men to vent their desires. Just as Laura thought, Count Russell was a perverted sadist. Dantalian said, He likes to collect noble ladies like you. The torture starts with candles, eventually being tied to a stake and burned to death. In the worst case, your limbs might be cut off. After thinking for a moment, Laura said, I can endure candles and being tied to a stake, but I can't lose my limbs because then I can never read again. Laura's answer amused Dantalian. He said, You really are different. Laura said, You don't need to flatter me. I knew I was a genius when I was 6 years old. Dantalian smiled and said, What a coincidence. I also realized I was a genius at 6. Laura had mastered geometric theorems at 6 that her teenage siblings hadn't learned. Dantalian and Laura shared very similar experiences, so their conversation was very pleasant. For Laura, her siblings were all too stupid. She didn't know how those people survived. If it were her, she would have ended herself. Dantalian waved his hand and said, Most people are that pitiful. There's nothing to be done about it, so it's up to people like us to thoroughly educate them. Laura said, Demon Lord, isn't that a troublesome task? Dantalian laughed with interest. Not troublesome, but quite challenging. But we're still part of this world. Sometimes we must make sacrifices for the greater good. Dantalian and Laura talked from trivial matters to their respective ideals. Dantalian said, You said life only happens once, and that's enough. You and I will get along well. At this point, Laura also stood up. She felt Dantalian was different from others. He made her feel comfortable, so she was willing to follow Dantalian. Then Dantalian asked, So who is the smartest person in the world? Laura answered without hesitation, of course. People themselves. Dantalian continued, For those who are irresponsible and break promises, what should we do? Laura said, Of course. Immediately cut off their limbs and sentence them to death. Dantalian asked, When you see a pure and innocent person, what thought flashes through your mind? Laura said, I don't understand why they would do such stupid things, but I would be blinded by their purity and acknowledge they are a superior species to me. Dantalian said, Then what is friendship? Laura answered, A feeling I choose to give to those who don't obstruct me. Dantalian asked, What is love? Laura said, A lamp disguises romance like a moth flying into fire. Dantalian was very satisfied with Laura's answers. To him, this was a perfect score. At the same time, Laura's favorability for Dantalian increased by 30 points. With a heavy metallic sound, Laura's shackles fell to the ground. Dantalian asked, How does freedom feel? Laura smiled for the first time, saying, It feels comfortable. Then Dantalian took out a piece of parchment. This was his first gift to Laura. When opened, a flame appeared and shot into the sky. The witch coven that received the signal soon appeared above the slave market. As the witches released their magic, the entire slave market was engulfed in raging flames. Dantalian let Laura see how he cleaned up cities. Meanwhile, Humbaba opened the cages controlling the slaves. The controlled slaves went crazy, attacking the slave traders, and Lapis found Count Russell. She killed him without mercy. At that moment, Giacomo awoke from his hazy slumber. However, the scene before him left him stunned. He hadn't expected the situation to turn out like this. All of this had started after he met that man. Giacomo realized he had been deceived, but it was all too late. The witches' faces were full of leisure, because this didn't seem like a battle. It was more like a hunt. Dantalian elegantly waved his hands amid the flames. Even Laura was momentarily stunned. Dantalian seemed to be standing on a grand stage, enjoying the pitiful screams of his prey. Perhaps others saw him as an absolute madman, but Laura thought he was an interesting person. Then Laura knelt on one knee. She said, From now on, I will accept you as my master. I hereby swear to dedicate the new life you've given me to you. As long as my master doesn't betray me first, I will faithfully carry out your commands. As long as my master respects me, I will dedicate my soul to my master." At the same time, Dantalian turned back to look at Laura. He said, "I solemnly swear to protect your dignity. As the 71st ranked demon lord, I guarantee your efforts will not be in vain. Your loyalty will be rewarded with glory." Just then, Giacomo arrived. This was unexpected for Dantalian, as he had planned to spare him. Dantalian said, "Giacomo, if you had just quietly slept on, I would have kept you safe." Hearing this, Giacomo was confused, as he had never seen the person before him. But soon a man's figure overlapped with him. Giacomo couldn't believe it, saying, "You're a demon lord? So everything you told me was a lie. You intended to deceive me from the start?" However, Dantalian denied his view. He said, "I merely fulfilled your wish to free Laura and the other slaves." Giacomo wondered what Dantalian would do with Laura. However, Dantalian told him Laura had willingly followed him. Giacomo couldn't believe what he heard. Then Dantalian said coldly, "I'm not joking with you. Go home now." Giacomo collapsed to the ground in fear. As Dantalian left, he didn't forget to remind him, "Learn from this and don't trust others so easily." Soon Lapis reunited with Dantalian. Dantalian wondered what Lapis had been doing. It turned out she had dealt with all the human traffickers and Count Rossel. Hearing this, Dantalian nodded with satisfaction. At this moment, Lapis noticed Laura behind him and asked, "Who is that person?" Then Dantalian introduced Laura. But Lapis wasn't talking about Laura. She meant the person behind them. Dantalian was also stunned. When he looked back, he found Giacomo had caught up. Dantalian knew his feelings for Laura must be very strong. Lapis immediately drew her sword. However, Dantalian stopped her. He said, "That person is one of the few pure souls in the world. Someone like him must live." Hearing this, Lapis frowned and said, "Are you serious?" At this point, Giacomo ran up directly, then grabbed Laura's hand. He said, "Did you really voluntarily accept that demon lord as your master?" Laura said firmly, "I've decided to live with this demon lord." Giacomo tried to persuade her, but Laura cut him off directly. "My master gave me a new life. For the first time in my life, I feel my heart beating so loudly." Hearing this, Giacomo said nothing more. He released Laura's hand. Dantalian knew that although Giacomo was a slave trader, he had never mistreated anyone, so he let him have his final farewell. However, Lapis's expression turned dark. The reason Giacomo had caught up was because he had something to tell Laura. He had buried this for a long time. He knew if he didn't say it now, he might never get another chance. When Giacomo said, "I love you," a sword pierced straight through his body. No one expected Lapis to disobey Dantalian's orders. Dantalian was furious. "Why? Do you know what you just did?" Lapis said coldly, "I'm just doing what needs to be done." Dantalian said, "Don't you dislike meaningless killing?" Lapis shook her head. "This isn't meaningless killing. You ordered the slaughter of all slave traders, including anyone connected to them, to ensure no evidence of our presence here. I don't understand why you'd spare a witness. Is there really such a thing as meaningless death here?" Lapis didn't stop. She drew her sword and stabbed his heart again. Meanwhile, Lapis's favorability kept dropping. The sword in Lapis's hand stabbed Giacomo's body again and again. Dantalian shouted, "Stop!" Even though the man was already dead, Lapis didn't stop. Blood gushed out, soaking her body, until Lapis's favorability dropped to 0. Dantalian didn't understand. He said, "You were the one who stopped me from killing before. That's why I thought you wouldn't be opposed to this." Lapis shook her head. "That's completely wrong, Your Highness. It seems you still don't understand what kind of person I am. I'm disappointed." Lapis lifted Giacomo's head and said, "I hope you'll engrave him firmly in your mind, because this might be your future if you forget that you're still weak. Sooner or later, someone will come to remind you of this fact." After a long silence, Dantalian said, "You really are a vicious woman." Lapis didn't deny it. "Until now, what kind of person did you think I was?" The scene returned to September 20th. Dantalian sat in his chair, not knowing where he went wrong. Barbados sat on the opposite sofa. Her brows were furrowed. After hearing Dantalian's story, she found it absurd. Then Dantalian stood up and walked to the side. He said, "Let me get you something. You'll definitely like it." Soon a bottle of wine that looked aged for many years appeared in Dantalian's hands. The moment Barbados saw the wine, her mouth was already watering. Dantalian said, according to Ivar, "It's from the Fire Spring Purgatory. The finest wine in the world." Barbados couldn't sit still anymore. "I can't believe you have something this good." Seeing Barbados's reaction, Dantalian hadn't expected her to be so interested. Then Dantalian said, "If you listen quietly, I'll let you have the first sip." Barbados's cheeks turned slightly red. Seeing this, Dantalian couldn't help but burst into laughter. He hadn't expected the 8th-ranked demon lord to show such an expression. After a moment, Dantalian continued his story. "Let's start from when my castle was attacked, because the climax of the story is coming. September 15th, Dantalian's castle. Many witches patrolled near the castle. Dantalian sat in the living room and asked Laura how she'd been living these days. For Laura, anywhere with books was the same, but at least she could eat like a normal person now. Just then, a knocking sound came from the side. It turned out the witches had discovered a human army of 2,000 people about 30 miles away. It seemed they had arrived. A cavalry force marched majestically toward the demon lord's castle. All the soldiers wore neat armor. Their equipment looked well prepared. The leader was the guardian of the north, Count Rosenberg. They had heard that demon Lord Dantalian's castle had mountains of black grass, so they decided to march on the Demon Lord's castle, because the Black Death had plunged the people into hell. If they didn't act, they would lose the people's trust. Therefore, whether the black grass was in the castle was secondary. What mattered was letting the people know the nation was helping them, and they didn't take the 71st ranked Demon Lord seriously at all. An army of 2,000 was enough to raise the castle to the ground. Meanwhile, the scouts ahead had investigated. They found no guards at the Demon Lord's castle, so for them, this was a guaranteed victory. The scene shifted to the castle. Dantalian excitedly pointed at Laura. "Your first command is finally here." However, Laura interrupted him. "All my knowledge came from books. I have no real combat experience. This could result in the complete annihilation of the mercenaries. Despite this, do you still insist on letting me command?" However, Dantalian just told her not to worry, because he didn't care how many mercenaries died. He said, "If they die, I can hire others. After all, I have plenty of money." Dantalian waved Laura forward and said, "No one can replace your position. You're a talent that no amount of gold can buy. If you feel nervous, just treat it as a game. You've been given 3,000 toys. Play however you want." After a moment of thought, Laura sat in the chair opposite. She said, "I will execute my master's orders and control these soldiers." Laura picked up the chess piece representing soldiers from the map. The moment she placed the piece, a war of 5,000 people began. When the human army arrived near the castle, they found the road to the castle blocked by an army. This puzzled Count Rosenberg, because he had never heard of Dantalian having an army. However, according to the scouts' information, these didn't look like the Demon Lord's army. They looked more like a group of mercenaries, numbering around a few hundred. This vague number angered Rosenberg. If they couldn't even determine the exact number, advancing rashly was a grave mistake, so he decided to investigate the front lines himself. Just as reported, they seemed to be mercenaries, about 200. What puzzled Rosenberg was why there were only soldiers here. Did this mean Dantalian already knew their army was coming, or had their information been leaked? Rosenberg was a veteran general who had fought countless battles. At that moment, he was thinking of dealing with the enemy in front of him first, as this plan had started half a month ago. So Rosenberg deduced that Dantalian couldn't have gathered that many mercenaries. Then he gave the order. The archers began their attack, but the mercenaries' behavior confused Rosenberg, because they didn't choose to counterattack. They just stood there motionless, raising their shields. Were they plotting something? But in such an open area, there couldn't possibly be reinforcements behind them. Rosenberg really couldn't figure out what the opposing commander was doing. They just attacked without changing formation. This was nothing but meaningless death. Seeing the mercenary formation start to crumble, Rosenberg increased the assault. Soon all the mercenaries were eliminated. However, Rosenberg felt uneasy, thinking, "Is this your plan, Dantalian?" On the other side, Dantalian was dumbfounded. Laura had just used those 200 men to prove something. She said, "So infantry is no match for cavalry." Dantalian asked, "What did you mean just now?" He angrily put his hand on Laura's head and rubbed vigorously. Laura said, "Master, don't rub my head. It will stunt my growth." Dantalian was very angry. "This is the worst command I've ever seen. So you really did treat them as toys?" It turned out she wanted to test whether Dantalian had given her real command authority. Laura said, aggrievedly, "I've only read books about strategy, so I wanted to test the contents." Dantalian laughed. "So what was your intention just now? Tell me. I won't get angry." Laura covered her little head. "I tested to see if they would really obey orders." Dantalian became even more irritated. His hand kept rubbing her, as if reaching into Laura's very soul. Then he said again, "The goddess of victory only smiles on the bravest challengers. If you're that timid, you'll never win." Laura lay on the table and looked pitifully at Dantalian. "The bravest challenger?" Dantalian said, "Yes, bold to the point of recklessness, bold enough to make people question whether your actions are appropriate." After a moment, Laura seemed to understand something. Then she nodded. It was a tiny gesture, yet it contained her determination. She said, "It must be as my master says. I may be a genius, but in the face of war, I'm like an infant." Dantalian said, "Charge forward boldly. I'll bear all the responsibility and losses. You go and bring back victory and glory. So what do you plan to do next?" Laura reached out and picked up a chess piece, then placed it directly in the middle of the map. As Rosenberg's army continued toward the castle, they spotted new mercenaries, so he quickly picked up his telescope to check. He found it was a mercenary unit of archers. This stunned Rosenberg. Earlier they were all infantry, and now they were all archers. He had never seen such tactics. Did Dantalian really not understand warfare? Rosenberg thought about it. Perhaps they didn't do this intentionally, but because they had no choice. They were probably supposed to meet up with the previous unit, but didn't arrive in time. This would explain why the previous unit didn't counterattack. If so, then everything made sense. They were just a ragtag group of mercenaries hastily gathered in a short time, so he needed to act quickly. Rosenberg immediately ordered them to disperse and surround them. Several hundred soldiers moved at once, attacking from all directions. The archers couldn't defend in time. They were quickly wiped out. This boosted the morale of Rosenberg's army. He shouted, Demon Lord Dantalian's forces are exhausted. Nothing can stop our advance now. The scene shifted. Dantalian angrily rubbed Laura's head. He said, I told you to be bold to the point of recklessness, but recklessness and stupidity are two different things. Laura said aggrievedly, My master, please hear me out first. This isn't repeating what I did before. I have other plans. Dantalian was very confused. Laura said, Isn't this an interesting thing? I feel like I'm playing the role of a military officer. Laura showed a creepy smile and continued, But what surprises me most is that my master actually let me treat soldiers as toys. I don't know if I can do it, because I know about so-called ethics and morality. Human happiness comes from feelings in the brain. The question is whether I can feel happy about acts that violate reason. In the end, I found it much more interesting than I imagined. Dantalian patted Laura's head. Your thoughts are exactly like mine. Do you know what that feeling is called? Some call it possessiveness. Some call it the desire for control. And the smarter ones say it's a process of satisfying one's sense of superiority. However, if I were to describe it, I would more directly use just one noun. Laura looked at Dantalian with curiosity. I prefer to call this wonderful feeling power. All bloodshed in the world is driven by it. This is also my reason for continuing this hellish life. Laura said, Master, do you live just to fully enjoy power? Dantalian laughed loudly. The smell of war is putrid. Yet despite this, have you ever wondered why people indulge in killing? That's because power is so sweet that it masks its foul odor. Laura had been locked in a cage for 16 years. She couldn't experience this taste, but now she had tasted it. She had never felt this way before. Because she understood the meaning in Dantalian's words with absolute clarity, her heart was beating intensely. Dantalian asked, So can you feel the reality of being alive? Laura said, Yes. I've never felt my existence so vividly. Just as Dantalian was about to give her his final advice, fragments of memory appeared in his mind like ripples. It was a girl kneeling before him and entrusting her life to him. Her eyes, even every word, clearly surfaced in Dantalian's mind. At this moment, Dantalian suddenly understood. Then he turned and ran toward Lapis's room. Connecting these memories together, everything made sense. Dantalian said, I really am a fool. This was merely a test. I finally understand why she was so angry and disappointed with me. Dantalian arrived at Lapis's room, out of breath. Lapis was expressionless. She was confused by Dantalian's behavior. Dantalian didn't hesitate and spoke directly, I love you, Lapis. Hearing that Dantalian had come to confess to Lapis again, Barbados's expression gradually changed. She said, Bastard, what kind of story have I been listening to? But Dantalian just smiled, love. Barbados, it's all about love. Barbados rolled her eyes. She still couldn't understand what Dantalian was saying. Then Dantalian explained, Why did I try to kill Lapis's mother? Killing her had no benefit for me, yet I still wanted to kill her. Dantalian took a flower from the vase. He said, There's only one answer to this question, that is, I love Lapis. Barbados couldn't help but laugh. Wait, you wanted to kill her mother because you love her? Did I hear that right? What kind of love is this? First, Dantalian tried to kill Lapis's mother, despite there being no benefit. Second, if he really killed the maid, rumors would spread and his reputation would plummet. Third, he wanted to keep the witness Giacomo alive. Finally, he just used Giacomo's sincerity as an excuse, acting like a hypocrite, trying to win Lapis's heart. The first time was impulsive, the second time was coincidence, the third time was inevitable. However, I was such a stupid fool that I couldn't even realize something so obvious. Having already made two mistakes, I made a third one. I rethought everything and finally came to an answer. Lapis is the error in my logic. The moment of pushing others down is my greatest pleasure, because I'm someone obsessed with power. So why would I feel displeased about killing that old woman and that maid? That's because the former is an act of power, while the latter is an act of love. After thinking it through, I finally understood what I needed to do. Barbados asked curiously, What are you going to do? Dantalian said, What I'm going to do is break up with Lapis. Hearing this, Barbados was stunned. She completely didn't understand what Dantalian was saying. Imagine her disappointment. How disappointed would Lapis be with me? She never asked me for love, although we've slept together many times. Barbados stared at Dantalian with a confused look. Dantalian continued, But body and heart are different things. Physical connection alone isn't enough. There's something deeper connecting me and her. She's a woman willing to do anything for power, yet my love blocked her path. And then there's her mother, the maid, and Giacomo. I unconsciously suppressed Lapis's desire for power, because, from another perspective, my love for her meant I ignored her wishes, because I loved power more than I loved her. Barbados interrupted, That's not love. You loved power more. That's absolutely ridiculous. But Dantalian nodded and said, Most people understand it that way, but that's just a misunderstanding of love. Barbados didn't want to hear his views on love anymore, and said, Your words are ruining the taste of my wine. Let's get back to what you were saying. What happened during the war? Time returned to September 15th, in front of Dantalian's castle. Rosenberg discovered the entrance to his castle, so he immediately sent people to investigate. Although he only came to gain the people's trust, he also hoped to obtain the black herbs, because this would allow him to make a fortune. Moments later, the soldiers sent to investigate reported back. They had discovered a large quantity of black herbs in the cave, estimated to be about 6 cartloads. Rosenberg was very pleased with this. He said, It seems the goddess of fortune is smiling upon us. So he immediately sent people to Dantalian's castle. After loading all the herbs, they didn't forget to blow up the entrance. The lieutenant was puzzled and said, We're just letting the demon lord Dantalian go like this? In Rosenberg's view, The most important thing right now was to transport these herbs back. Killing a demon lord rank 71st was purely a waste of time. Rosenberg guessed that Dantelin had no soldiers left, otherwise he couldn't have given up the black herbs so easily. In other words, since he had no army, no one would pursue them. He said, "For the sake of our suffering people, we must return as quickly as possible." When Dantelin heard that Laura had given them the black herbs, he was stunned. However, Laura showed no sign of panic at that moment, because she had prepared a very entertaining performance. The lieutenant was quite pleased at this moment, as these herbs were extremely valuable. He believed Count Rosenberg would surely make a fortune, but Rosenberg's words shocked him, because he planned to provide all the herbs to the sick for free. "We've already been very lucky to arrive here safely. I have a responsibility to bestow this good fortune upon my subjects." The lieutenant immediately apologized for his earlier behavior. He hadn't expected the Count to be such a noble person, so he decided to be loyal to the Count for life. Upon hearing this, the Count's lips curled slightly. He said, "Then let's hurry home now. I'm sure your family is waiting for you to return." Just then, a soldier frantically broke the peaceful atmosphere, because they had spotted enemy soldiers ahead. The lieutenant beside him was startled, but the Count remained relatively calm, because he needed to know the enemy's position and numbers. The scout became hesitant. He said, "They're in the valley up ahead, about 3,000 men." When he learned the number, Rosenberg was shocked, so he immediately went to take a look. Indeed, he spotted an army of about 3,000. Rosenberg didn't choose to stop. Instead, he continued forward at maximum speed. He said, "We need to get out of this forest as quickly as possible, and you must be ready to fight at any moment." Rosenberg didn't know how to handle the situation next, because he hadn't expected the enemy to still have several thousand men. After learning the difference in numbers, the soldiers realized they would lose. But as the commander, Rosenberg couldn't show any panic. More importantly, he had to get these black herbs back. Rosenberg was trying hard to figure out the current situation because he didn't know where these soldiers came from. He guessed that the army had appeared after their base was destroyed. Perhaps he was commanding his troops in the chaos. After sorting out his thoughts, Rosenberg called all the soldiers to halt. He needed to focus all the soldiers' will and said, "Listen up. The enemy has just arrived at the battlefield. We have the advantage because we destroyed their base. Their fatigue from marching hasn't worn off, while we are well rested. If we attack now, victory will be ours. More importantly, we're almost home. Your families are waiting for you to return. Let's end this battle and return to our families." Under Rosenberg's encouragement, the soldiers quickly rekindled their fighting spirit. They responded to Rosenberg with angry roars. As the horns sounded, they launched their attack on the mercenaries. At this moment, both sides were evenly matched, because the soldiers' will to fight was crucial. Dantelin asked Laura behind him how the battle was going. Laura went from being nervous at first to gradually calming down. Her smile was stiff, and his lips seemed to be twitching, because the enemy had fallen into her trap. If they had fled at the first sight of the army, at least 30% of them could have survived. Instead, they chose to fight, because Laura had thrown them an irresistible bait. That was the black herbs. With the black herbs, they could save their territory. Rosenberg was blinded by this illusion, to the point where they couldn't bring themselves to abandon the carts. At this moment, Dantelin had to admit that Laura was indeed a genius. Using the hope that the black herbs brought, they didn't even realize they were being fooled. Just like fish lured by bait, they themselves put their mouths toward the hook. Then Dantelin asked Laura what she planned to do next. Laura knew their morale was high right now, but she was selfish and couldn't tolerate the fish enjoying the bait forever. She said, "My dear master, let's go to the battlefield and enjoy the show." On the battlefield at this moment, soldiers from both sides were constantly killing each other. It was still impossible to see the difference between the two sides. At this point, the lieutenant noticed that the enemy had deployed cavalry. They were launching a flanking attack, which was a very stupid tactic. But Rosenberg broke out in a cold sweat. He was puzzled why the enemy didn't issue commands like attacking the flank. Was it because the other side had no ability to grasp the battlefield at all? Rosenberg thought for a long time and finally decided to concentrate his forces on the right flank. Upon hearing this, the lieutenant was startled and said, "This will weaken our left flank's defense. The enemy might break through. Please reconsider, my lord." Rosenberg said, "They're aiming for the black herbs. We can't let them succeed." On the other side, Dantelin was on the cliff above, enjoying the battle before him. Laura was very satisfied with the current situation. She said, "Master, war is truly delightful. The thought of making others do as I wish fills my heart with joy." Laura knew that attacking the enemy's left flank now would easily win, but she thought it was too boring. She wanted Rosenberg's soldiers to see more hope, then lose control like mad dogs. This would bring her more pleasure. Meanwhile, Rosenberg could see the battle wasn't going well, because his army was being slowly suppressed. So he needed to find a way to turn the tide, but he couldn't do it at the moment, because the soldiers were fighting desperately against the enemy. They believed that if they tried a little harder, they could at least protect the black herbs and their families. But in reality, this tiny gap would never close. Rosenberg said, "The enemy keeps having the advantage. Have we reached our limit?" The lieutenant guessed that the people before might have just been bait, meant to make them let their guard down. However, the Count rejected his view, because those hundreds of people died completely meaninglessly. If they had this many men, they could have completely surrounded them, and Dantelin's herbs and cave had been destroyed by them, which brought them no benefit at all. Rosenberg couldn't figure out the reason no matter how he tried, but he always had a lingering sense of fear in his heart. Rosenberg felt he couldn't hesitate any longer. He decided to deploy his trump card directly. He sent all 4 mages into battle. Even though the number of mages was small, it was enough to make people fear the fireballs falling from the sky. Rosenberg kept praying that the goddess of victory would be on their side. However, just as the mages flew toward the battlefield, a group of people on the other side approached on broomsticks. Those people wore large cone-shaped hats on their heads. Before they could react, their mages were directly torn to pieces. Rosenberg broke out in a cold sweat because he hadn't expected Dantelin to still have a witch core. He simply couldn't understand. If the enemy commander had deployed them from the beginning, they could have easily wiped them out. Then the only explanation was that the enemy's goal wasn't to annihilate them, but to toy with them. He had made the wrong move from the very start. Then he called out to the lieutenant. He said, "There's no point in continuing to fight. Raise the white flag and surrender now." However, the lieutenant didn't understand, because they could fight to the last. Rosenberg saw the essence of this battle. The enemy was slowly torturing them until they were all wiped out. If they surrendered, perhaps the enemy would spare them. Soon they lowered their flags and weapons. The lieutenant still couldn't accept this outcome. Then Rosenberg told him that now they could only endure. But don't forget today's humiliation. One day, we will avenge this humiliation. The mercenaries formed two lines. Then a blurry figure walked down from the mountain. What no one expected was, the enemy commander was actually a young girl with an angelic face. Everyone was captivated by the girl's charming appearance. Just then, the girl gently lifted her top and bowed humbly to greet them. However, Rosenberg's sixth sense was telling him, the girl before him was the one causing his unease. Behind her smile was more like a hidden demon. Every nerve in his body was sending warnings to his brain. Rosenberg didn't hesitate and immediately told his soldiers to run. This was a trap. At the same time, countless arrows rained down from the sky. Rosenberg's army didn't even have time to react before being mercilessly shot down. An arrow flew toward Rosenberg, but the lieutenant blocked it with his own body. Then a group of soldiers formed a human shield around the count. The wounded lieutenant urged the count to leave quickly, because he couldn't fall here. Countless citizens in the city were waiting for him to save them. The moment they helped Rosenberg onto his horse, the lieutenant slapped the horse's back. Rosenberg was extremely remorseful. It was all because of his underestimation of the enemy, that he had sacrificed all of them. Rosenberg knew that the blonde girl was the commander. That greeting was nothing but the signal to fire. Rosenberg swore in his heart that he would never let her go in this lifetime. One day he would kill her with his own hands. Watching Rosenberg flee in such a sorry state, Laura chose not to pursue. Dantelin also agreed with Laura's decision. He was one of the most powerful nobles in the northern region of the Habsburg Empire. If Dantelin captured him now, it would only bring trouble. A demon lord, ranked 71st, the weakest, capturing a noble marquis of the empire. This would attract the attention of the entire continent. Some people might become vigilant, and Dantelin didn't want that. Then he called out to Laura and said, "Although we won, this wasn't a remarkable victory. This was just 3,000 suppressing 2,000. Even the castle was destroyed. Other demon lords might laugh at me." Laura teased, "In the world, only my master would gloat over his demon castle being destroyed. The other demon lords probably look down on master completely." However, Dantelin just smiled, because this was exactly what he wanted. Rosenberg could have easily assembled an army of 10,000 soldiers. However, he underestimated me. Thanks to this, you and I were able to survive. That Rosenberg didn't know this simple truth, which led to his failure. Laura carefully savored Dantelin's words. This was a truth worth remembering. Then Dantelin had Laura come closer, because he wanted to properly reward her. Laura was quite puzzled. However, when Laura walked up to him, Dantelin grabbed her, then placed his hand on Laura's head and kept ruffling it. Laura asked pitifully, "Why is master still punishing me?" Dantelin looked at the prisoners of war below. He said, "Do you see? Do we have enough space to hold them all? But letting them go just like that would make me very unhappy. So, let's dispose of all of them." Soon Dantelin arrived at the execution grounds. He watched with his own eyes as the prisoners were killed one by one. Just then, their lieutenant called out to Dantelin. He said, "I'm the lieutenant here. I'll trade my head for their lives." However, Dantelin showed a mischievous expression. He said to Laura, "You haven't killed anyone with your own hands yet, have you? Why not give it a try? Imagination and reality are two completely different things. This will be very helpful for your future." Laura didn't think much about it. Instead, she slowly drew her sword and walked toward the lieutenant step by step. In their eyes, Laura at this moment was like a demon who killed without blinking. Laura swung 5 or 6 times, until she chopped off that person's head. Laura's expression didn't change at all. Even Dantelin had to admit she was indeed a psychopath. Then Laura stepped forward and picked up the lieutenant's head. She decided to keep it as a memento, because this was her first kill. Barbados swirled her wine glass. Dantelin's story was quite fascinating. She said, "So in the end, you won the war." Dantelin affirmed, "All thanks to the person who wrote that letter." Barbatos hadn't expected that Laura would be as interesting as Dantelin. But more than that, there was something that made her even more curious. That was how Dantelin knew about Laura's abilities in advance. She said, after all, her name only became known recently, let alone her abilities. Even I, the demon ranked 8th, didn't know. More accurately, it seems you knew about her long ago. Upon hearing this, Dantelin was silent for a moment. He said, "I don't understand what Lady Barbados means. Would you believe such a thing if I told you?" Barbados brushed her hair and stared straight at Dantelin, then burst out laughing. She said, "Interesting, this is truly interesting." Then Barbados changed the subject. She said, "Do you know what I'm thinking right now?" Dantelin scratched his chin and said, I think you're wondering what exactly happened between me and Lapis. Barbados remained silent. She just looked at Dantelin with anticipation. Right after Dantelin confessed to Lapis, the answer he received left him stunned, because she was disappointed. Lapis didn't want Dantelin to treat her as a lover. What she needed was a partner in power. She didn't want the relationship between lovers to bind each other. Even more hateful was that Dantelin still wanted to steal her prey. To this, Dantelin apologized. Lapis said, "So you just said you like me?" Dantelin nodded. However, Lapis just sighed lightly. She said, "Let's establish some rules. Please don't pursue my affection. Likewise, I won't crave your love. This is most important for both your highness and me, because controlling the power of the demon world is what we want. To achieve this goal, there must be a cold attitude that can endure blood and tears." And Dantelin completely agreed with Lapis's proposal. Lapis hadn't expected it to turn out this way. She hadn't expected Dantelin to agree so quickly. In Lapis's view, love was just a weakness, a useless emotion. Because she was once a lowly person, she valued success above everything else. At this moment, Dantelin smiled slightly and said, "I have something to say to you about this. I'm not the only one bound by such emotions. You are too, so you have no right to blame me." Lapis was also stunned and said, "I don't understand what you mean." Dantelin looked at Lapis and said, "You've also fallen in love with me, haven't you?" Lapis frowned and said, "Have you lost your mind? Don't be so self-centered." Upon hearing this, Dantelin said, "Wouldn't it be beneficial to you if I became a slave to love? Because when I gain power, that would also be your power. But you didn't do that. You couldn't even accept this idea. Seeing me obsessed with power rather than with you, you weren't angry but happy. Why would you react this way?" Hearing Dantelin's words, Lapis's eyes were filled with shock. At this moment, she realized, just as Dantelin said, she hadn't rejected his courtship either. The reason for all this was that she also loved Dantelin. However, both of their love for power surpassed their love for each other. Therefore, the people they liked were those who loved power as they did, just like musicians are attracted to those who appreciate music. Dantelin said, "I love you, and I also love the you who loves power. In this filthy world, we are the same kind of people, so we can cover each other's flaws and become each other's support. I'll say it one last time. I love you, Lapis." Lapis happily responded to Dantelin, "Me too. I love you too." The distance between them grew closer. Slowly, they could hear each other's breathing. Finally, their lips met in a kiss. At the same time, the dialogue box prompted, "You've reached a consensus with the other party. Lapis's affection has increased by 50%. Dantelin said, "Lapis and I relied on each other to become stronger. Perhaps our love lacks warmth and tenderness, but we're still moving towards something. We annihilate the enemies before us without wavering. This is our way." Barbatos was puzzled, because she felt Dantelin's words were directed at her. Suddenly, Dantelin said, "Wasn't your magic supposed to help me find the person who wrote me the letter? Yet it seems you still haven't found them." Barbatos frowned and asked, "What do you mean?" Dantelin laughed. "Anyway, the news of not finding them won't reach anyone else, right?" This made Barbatos angry. She said, "Are you questioning me?" Seeing Barbatos still being stubborn, Dantelin directly revealed his hand. He said, "The one who wrote that letter to warn me about the invaders was none other than, it's you, Barbatos." Barbatos' face froze. She said, "You're saying things I don't understand." Dantelin scanned Barbados and said, "You're the mastermind behind all this, Barbados." Barbados swirled her wine glass. She said, "I'm the one drinking, so why does it feel like you're the one who's drunk?" Dantelin said, "In that case, let's look at the final answer. First, the person who sent me that letter obviously harbored goodwill toward me. Otherwise, they wouldn't have told me about the enemy's existence. The key here is the breadth of the information network. However, who could know the details about Rosenberg and have the ability to obtain this information? So the mastermind is undoubtedly someone with power, and you are exactly that kind of person. Although I don't want to admit it, I'm ranked 71st after all. How many powerful people in this world would genuinely like me? So why would you support someone like me? Is it because I made your enemy collapse at the gathering?" Upon hearing this, Barbatos laughed loudly. "I'm curious what you want to say, but I'm not the type to go out of my way to write such things. If I have something to say, I'll say it to your face like this. If I really were the mastermind, I'd have no reason to deny it, because that would mean I saved you, and I'd get a favor." Dantelin nodded and said, "The reason is simple. It's because you sent that letter not to save me. You wrote this letter simply to test me, right?" Barbatos said, "I did hope you were a useful newcomer, but it turns out you're a madman." Dantelin said, "You did this to find out whether I made money by selling black herbs or did something else. You wanted to know whether I gathered these black herbs before the plague outbreak through luck or ability. You thought using Rosenberg to test my strength was a good idea, and the result is now obvious." Dantelin safely passed the test from Marquise Rosenberg. Dantelin also deduced what she planned to do next. That was to recruit him into her faction. But before that, there was a big problem. That was Lapis's existence. If a mixed-blood succubus joined her camp, it would leave a bad impression on her faction. Dantelin said, "You're afraid of tarnishing your faction's image, so you want me to break up with Lapis, therefore you planned all of this." Barbatos interrupted Dantelin. "What evidence do you have?" Dantelin said, "Simple. It's Lapis's mother." Upon hearing this, Barbatos' pupils contracted. Dantelin said, "Even though she's Lapis's birth mother, that was many years ago, and Lapis might not be her biological daughter. lying in front of a big demon lord means instant death. Yet Lapis's mother was abnormally confident, as if she was completely certain. This point was very suspicious. So you were the one who brought Lapis's mother here. Not only that, to monitor me, you must have also planted your subordinates in my team, like that beast-eared maid from before. You managed to mess up my relationship with Lapis so badly in such a short time. If I hadn't realized this midway, things would have developed exactly as you planned. Barbados widened her eyes and said, so you're saying I wanted to break you two up? Don't flatter yourself. If it were me, I'd immediately kill useless trash. Dantelin said, if Lapis were an insignificant person, you might do that. Barbados's teeth made a grinding sound. She said, what do you mean by that? Dantelin placed his hand on his chest and said, please accept my compliment, because you're a qualified politician. Lapis and I are now the most sensational couple in the demon world. Many people have witnessed our love, so if one of us were killed for personal gain, the other's reputation would be completely ruined. Upon hearing this, Barbados said she didn't care about reputation. Dantelin directly interrupted her, you're the leader of a major faction in the demon world. No matter how you deny it, politics matters in this regard. You needed to guide me and Lapis toward a breakup no matter what. However, what you didn't expect was that people with such twisted love like us actually exist. So when you heard rumors of us fighting, you rushed over immediately. Because right after fighting with a lover is when the relationship is most fragile. You wanted to seize this opportunity, preferably to destroy our relationship. You wanted to know what happened between me and Lapis, so you could better break us apart. So you appeared as if nothing was wrong merely 2 hours after we broke up, and connecting all the suspicious points to you, the entire mystery became clear. But Barbados still wouldn't admit it. Then, Dantelin snapped his fingers, and then Lapis came in pushing a box. From the moment the bat flew away, Lapis had sent witches to follow it. As a result, it disappeared directly 3 miles from the castle. Dantelin said, because this letter had too many flaws, you turned it into a bat. You used your gorgeous magic to search for a criminal that didn't exist at all. If I hadn't paid attention, I would have been fooled long ago. Then Dantelin signaled for Lapis to open the box. Seeing this, Barbados was stunned, because inside were clearly 2 heads. Lapis wasn't angry because I tried to kill her mother. She was angry because someone wanted to steal the pleasure of her revenge. The same went for insulting her maid. Barbados still looked puzzled and said, what are you trying to say? Dantelin smiled and said, you were wrong from the start. Lapis is not a woman you can easily measure. She's incredibly charming. She firmly executes her revenge plan. That's why I fell in love with her. No one can stop us. Upon hearing this, Lapis blushed and said, your highness talks too much. I'll take my leave now. Then she pushed the box and left. Dantelin continued, your plan to break me and Lapis up has failed. How does that feel? Barbados fell silent. She lowered her head while her shoulders trembled. Then she started laughing. Then her uncontrollable laughter transformed into wild laughter. She lay on the sofa and slowly let out a breath. She said, Dantelin, you passed the test. You've brought me more pleasure than I imagined. Barbados shed all her disguises. This was her truest self. Dantelin said, as the actor who performed for you all night, it was worth it. However, she was displeased and said, you spent half the day making me laugh, and you call this a performance? Dantelin said, if I can win you over in one night, I've got myself a great bargain. Barbados burst out laughing. She said, my true face hasn't been revealed for over 300 years. Now someone has seen it. I'm worried that person will reveal my identity. If you join my faction and break up with her, I might be generous enough to spare your life. At the same time, Barbados bit her finger and cast a spell at Dantelin. In an instant, he was immobilized. In terms of power, Dantelin couldn't possibly contend with Barbados. Then she kicked the table apart. She walked toward Dantelin and said, if you refuse, you know what the result will be. Dantelin asked, why would a demon lord like you go to such lengths to recruit me into your faction? Your goal must be to eliminate humanity, right? Barbados gently lifted Dantelin's chin. She didn't deny it. Then a dagger appeared directly in her hand. She said, now tell me, are you willing to break up with her and be with me? The dagger moved closer and closer until blood seeped out, and Dantelin said he would do it. Upon hearing this, Barbados was very pleased. She said, so you agree? However, what Dantelin meant wasn't about separating from Lapis. What he spoke of was what Barbados truly desired, the only means to eliminate humanity. He said, I'll present war as a gift to you. Barbados said, this would be a great war involving all demon lords and humans. You can't make it. Dantelin showed a smile like a demon from hell and said, this is the difference between a theorist and a politician. Spread rumors that the plague was spread by the demon lords. The human world is on the verge of collapse. Their dissatisfaction with national actions has reached an all-time high. If we spread rumors that the demon lords caused this plague, the rulers of the human world will exploit it. Barbatos still had some doubts. Dantelin continued, they'll actively exploit this rumor. They'll point all fingers at the demons, portraying them as the source of all evil. Barbados understood Dantelin's intent, that demon lords could use the same method. Dantelin said, humans have long been dissatisfied with the demon lord's rule. They won't pass up this opportunity. If we can't invade them, then we can only be invaded by them. Now let's show humans what true hell is. Barbados lay in Dantelin's arms, staring at him intently. She had to admit Dantelin was clever, but if he thought being clever could conquer the world, he was wrong. Only time would tell how far he could go, but she would accompany him to the end. If she just cut off his head, that would be far less entertaining. Barbados looked at Dantelin seductively and said, you've excited me so much. much. You won't let me leave, right? At this moment, Dantelin's whole body was burning hot, and his consciousness began to blur, because what Barbados had just used was a desire curse. At the same time, Barbados released the shackles on Dantelin. Then she kept rubbing his chest with her fingers. She really wanted to be shamelessly beaten by a bastard like Dantelin, then pant like a dog.